Attention all candidates. The mock reincarnation is about to begin. Please proceed to the examination hall immediately. Those who arrive late will be considered to have automatically forfeited their eligibility for reincarnation. That last part isn't a threat. It's a schedule. Miss the bell and the rest of your life is already written, and it's not a good read. So I ran. Everybody ran. Thousands of us in blue and white uniforms pouring across the courtyard of 6th District No. 1 Middle School like somebody had kicked over an anthill, and me somewhere in the middle of it, trying not to think too hard about what was waiting on the other side of that door. Xiaolei, the chubby kid next to me, was breathing like he'd already run a marathon. Do you think we can get a D-level rating? Do you think we can actually become simulators? Believe in yourself, I said. You can definitely do it. I was lying, not viciously, just the ordinary kind of lying you do at 8 in the morning to a friend whose hands are shaking, because here's what a simulation actually is. They drop your soul into another world, you live a whole life there start to finish, and at the end, the system grades you like a term paper. Personal achievements, global impact, main storyline completion, get a D or better, and you come back with the power to fight the things that eat people. Get below a D and you lose your eligibility permanently, and permanently means permanently. And the grading is not the hard part. The hard part is that a simulated life is still a life. You can catch a fever at 3 and die. You can get robbed at 30 and die. You can trip on a step. The universe in there doesn't care that you're a student taking an exam. The teacher said everybody draws a permanent talent on their first simulation, the fat kid said. I hope my luck's better than my mom's. She pulled an E-rank talent, dishwashing master. She's been washing dishes in a hotel for 11 years. Isn't your dad still around? Wrong question. His face just folded up. My dad had it worse. He got E-rank serving like a slave. Your family has really had a tough time. I gave him the sympathetic look. I did not tell him that I'd been thinking about my own draw for about 4 years straight, or that I hadn't slept properly in a month, or the other thing. The other thing being that I wasn't from here. I'd been dropped into this world 8 years ago with a full set of memories from a different one, which sounds like a gift and is mostly an ongoing customer service complaint. Because the world I'd landed in was in the process of being eaten, evil gods whispering in people's ears, black mist rolling through cities every night, zombies, evil spirits, abyss demons, and a catalog of things nobody's bothered naming. Human cities were falling one after another, and the average lifespan had dropped under 40. There is exactly one way out of that. Become a simulator. That's it. That's the whole ladder. And if you fail, you don't just stay ordinary. You lose your only value. You become an appendage. Cattle and horses for the people who didn't fail. All the way down at the bottom of the world with no hope of getting out for the rest of your under 40 years. The fat kid's parents were the demonstration model. He knew it. That's why his hands were shaking. We walked into the teaching building together and split at the stairs. I'm in exam room 1, he said. I'll go on ahead. I watched him go, and then I never saw him again, but I didn't know that yet. So I just went to find my room. There were no desks in there, no proctors either. Just dozens of oval-shaped hibernation pods lined up in rows with a number stuck on the side of each one, high-tech eggs waiting to be sat in. I found mine, pressed my student card to the sensor, and the hatch popped with a little beep like a microwave finishing. I lay down. It was more comfortable than my bed, which says less about the pod than about my bed. Advanced filtration so you don't choke on your own air. Acupuncture and medical functions built in so you can lie in there for 6 months and come out with your muscles intact. 6 months. That's the part they mention casually, and it's the part that tells you everything. The broadcast came back on. Attention all candidates. The hibernation pod anchors your soul, preventing you from getting lost in all heavens. Candidates who have not yet arrived, please enter your pod within 3 minutes. Exam countdown begins. 3, 2, 1. Simulated reincarnation begins. White light swallowed the room. My consciousness went up like it was strapped to a rocket, hit some ceiling I couldn't see, broke through it, and dropped me into the deepest sleep of my life. Then the notification started. Simulated imprint activated. You may use this mark to perform a simulated reincarnation. Note: time flows differently in every world. No matter how long you stay inside, 1 day passes in the main world. Note: your score is calculated from personal achievement, global impact, and main storyline completion. Note: if your initial score is below D, you permanently lose your simulation eligibility. Note: you are strictly prohibited from revealing your identity as a simulator to anyone inside the world. Violation results in instant elimination. I opened my eyes in a white space with nothing in it. On the back of my right hand there was a crescent mark made of patterns so fine they looked printed, and then a whole library dumped itself into my skull at once. You may view your life script once, free, on your first simulation. World: 1-star Marshall Dow world. Difficulty: hard. Introduction: a modern world on the verge of a dark invasion. Martial arts are its last hope, but spiritual energy is scarce. Martial arts are in decline, and technology is flourishing. Ancient martial arts are becoming flashy performance. In a few decades, they may be forgotten completely. Main quest, rebuild the glory of the warriors, and then it showed me my life, not a summary, a script. Line by line. Dated, like a coroner working backwards. You are born at age 0 into a family of martial arts masters. A boy. Your parents run a small school with a good local reputation. You are the only child. Your birth brings them immense joy, and they dote on you. Always the best toys, always the best food. At age 1, you like to kick off your covers at night. You catch a cold. High fever for several days. This leaves you with health problems for the rest of your life. That's the first line. Kicked off a blanket. That's where it starts. At age 3, your father's old injuries catch up with him, and he is defeated and publicly humiliated by Master Haiyang at the ranking that happens once every 5 years. At age 5, Haiyang breaks into inner strength, and suddenly he's famous, and your family's school is crushed and teetering on bankruptcy. Your father grits his teeth and sells most of the ancestral property to hire an outside expert, an inner strength master. At age 7, business has recovered a little, but the head instructor your father hired is quietly meeting with Haiyang's people, and your father starts to suspect. At age 8, you show real talent, but the childhood illness slows you down. During sparring, the head instructor's disciple critically injures you. Your father tries to dismiss the man. And then the line that made me stop reading and start again from the top. Inviting a god is easy. Sending him away is hard. The head instructor is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He colludes with Haiyang, seizes all your family's property, and drives your entire family out of the school. Your parents use every connection they have. Not one person is willing to offend an inner strength master for your sake. The family fortune is taken. You are abandoned by everyone. Your father dies of a sudden heart attack. At age 10, your mother takes you abroad under a false name. At 12, you train until you forget to sleep and eat and reach external strength minor achievement, a glimmer of hope for revenge. At 13, you hit major achievement, and the head instructor pays the Red Lotus sect a fortune to have you killed. They don't kill you. They take you. You become a subject in genetic experiments, and you die there. On learning of your death, your mother suffers a mental breakdown and dies with resentment in her heart. Comment, your life is like a tragedy, full of suffering and misfortune. Comment, it gave me a comment. 4 stars, would not live again. I stood there in that white nothing and read the whole thing twice, and what got me wasn't the dying. I'd made a certain peace with dying, in the abstract, the way you do. What got me was that it happened in order, that there was a man with a plan, and the plan worked, and every single person my parents ever helped looked at them and did the math and said no. 13 years. The whole thing takes 13 years, and I never even reach adulthood. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. I was still standing there with my jaw somewhere around my knees when the system, which has no sense of timing whatsoever, pinged again. You may randomly obtain a simulation talent on your first use of the simulator. Do you wish to draw immediately? Talent. Right. Okay. This was the part that mattered. Talents run F through S. The higher the rank, the more it warps the world around you, and the truly lucky ones pull an S and change their fate without lifting a finger. A good draw here, and hard difficulty stops being a death sentence and starts being a schedule. The card pool came up. Blooming Prosperity, Grade C. The flower language of steel wool is forbearance and prosperity. When you are male, you receive more affection from older members of the opposite sex. King of Involution, Level D, work efficiency plus 50%. However, the constant competitive pressure has taken its toll, reducing your lifespan by 50 years. CPU, Great Master, Grade C. You possess exceptional acting skills, a deep understanding of human nature, and are adept at manipulating and suppressing others through language for personal advantage. Rich Guy V50, Level D. When you type this sentence in any comment section, a random user is forced to send you 50 Wayne by virtual gift, limited to 10 times per day. I read them, then I read them again. What kind of insane talents are these? I am about to be born into a world that eats people. My entire family is scheduled for destruction. My personal expiry date is 13, and my options are be popular with aunties, work harder, and die sooner, become extremely annoying at parties, or commit low-grade fraud. The only one with any actual mechanical value was Rich Guy V50, 10 times a day, 50 a pop, 500 a day, 15,000 a month for lying in bed and typing one sentence. Honestly, not bad money. Genuinely. I did the math twice. I also spent about 4 seconds wondering whether that counts as extortion in a court of law and whether the answer changes if you're doing it from a hospice. The countdown was almost gone. I gritted my teeth and hit draw because the only thing worse than a bad talent is no talent. Talent is being drawn. Warning. An unknown error has occurred during the reincarnation simulation. Under maintenance. The talent card pool has been reset. I sat up. Congratulations on acquiring the unique hidden talent, self-adaptive talent. Talent rating in progress. Tentatively named Divine Rank. Divine Rank. I want to be clear about this. S is the top. S is the ceiling. S is what people are talking about when they say a talent can rewrite a destiny. Divine Rank isn't above S, the way an A is above a B. Divine Rank is a rumor. It's the thing an old man tells you about while you're pretending to listen. Self-adaptive talent. When you play The Sims, this talent automatically changes to the one best suited for the current simulation. Then it did exactly that, right in front of me. Self-adaptive talent in effect. Congratulations on acquiring the Divine Rank talent. Heaven rewards diligence in this simulation. Heaven rewards diligence. One reaps a hundredfold reward for one's efforts. Even breathing can make you stronger. When you persist in doing something, you will reap unexpected rewards. Duration, 10 seconds. Can be turned on and off manually. Note, this talent consumes a large amount of energy. Its duration is tied to your physical strength. The stronger your physique, the longer it lasts. A golden card floated up in front of me, glowing like it knew what it was worth. 10 seconds. 10 whole seconds of getting 100 times the return on anything I do, which sounds like nothing until you sit with it, and then it sounds like the most dangerous sentence anyone has ever said to me, because I already knew how the rest went. My school is bankrupt from bad management. I'm a young grandmaster who started training at 3. My father invites a wolf into the house and loses everything. I settle it with my fists. The head instructor, the Red Lotus sect, whoever else has a slot booked on my calendar of tragedies, 1 punch each, next. This time, I thought, I am absolutely not letting the past repeat itself. Talent already used. Supermodel talent detected. Simulation difficulty increased to hell level. Simulated reincarnation officially begins. I didn't even get to open my mouth. My consciousness shot up again, and I arrived somewhere completely new. The year was 2123. Qian country, the capital city, a hospital, and a baby was screaming, and the baby was me. Mr. Chin, Mrs. Lin, congratulations. It's a boy. A nurse carried me over, and my father took me like I was a soap bubble with a temper. Big grin, absolutely no chill. That's wonderful. Our Chin family has a worthy successor. Meyer, look at him. His nose and eyes are just like yours. Keep your voice down, said my mother, who had been in labor for a while and had opinions. Don't scare the child. By the way, he hasn't been named yet. My father thought about it for exactly as long as it takes to breathe in. The path of martial arts is fraught with difficulties, and the journey is long and arduous. From now on, let's name the baby Qin Lan. This child is clearly intelligent. He will carry on the legacy of my Qin family martial hall. Qin Baoshan laughed like a man who just won something. Then he thought about the actual state of his martial arts school, and the laugh went a bit thin around the edges. I lay there in my swaddling with a name I'd already had in a previous life, and understood something about the machinery of these places. Every reincarnation world has a heavenly will running underneath it, and its fingerprints are everywhere. Same name, 2 lifetimes. That's not a coincidence. That's a signature. Also, I'd landed well. Family of 4 generations, roof, food, both parents alive and disgustingly in love. That's better than the orphan opening a lot of people get, for now, because I could see the whole schedule from here. At 1, I catch a cold that ruins me. At 3, the school fails its rating, and my father sells the ancestral property to hire the man who will kill him. Everything after that is just consequences. 2 things to change, just 2, and both of them are in the first 3 years. The other thing on my mind was the word hell. Standard first simulations run easy or normal. Hard is considered brutal. Hell is a word that appears in this system's vocabulary for the same reason your car has an airbag. So while my parents were out of the room, I turned on my talent to see what a hundredfold return actually looks like when you have the physical capabilities of a wet towel. You complete 1 breath. Your cardiopulmonary function improves. You have successfully cried out once. Your physical fitness has slightly improved. Energy depleted. Talent duration ended. Something warm went through me from the inside, like being lowered into a hot spring, and I lay there in a hospital bassinet doing the arithmetic. Breathing. Breathing counts. Crying counts. One reaps a hundredfold reward for one's efforts, and the system's definition of effort is apparently anything at all, so a divine rank talent can be used like this. And then I did the only thing that made sense, which is that I became the most annoying infant in the history of the Qian country capital. Every day, aside from eating and sleeping, I crawled. Wall to wall, corner to corner, dragging myself across the floorboards of a martial arts school with the grim focus of a man doing laps in a prison yard. My parents were dumping resources into me anyway. Best toys, best food, medicinal soups brewed out of herbs they absolutely could not afford, and I converted every gram of it into distance. I spoke at 3 months. I was walking briskly at 1 year. By then I was taller than most 4- and 5-year-olds and built like a small fire hydrant. My father did not find this alarming. My father became insufferable. My son Qinlan is exceptionally talented, he told anyone who slowed down near him. He has the potential to become a grandmaster. Sir, I am one. I have 4 teeth. The night of my first birthday, my whole body started shaking. Every pore on me opened at once and pushed out a layer of black impurities, and I lay there on the floor of my own room, an enormous, filthy toddler, feeling something finish. You have crawled a total of 1,000 kilometers. Physique significantly enhanced. Breakthrough to minor achievement. Heaven-defying fate change. You experienced a minor achievement at age 1 and successfully changed your fate of catching a cold. Main story. Progress. 1%. Reward. 1,000 simulation points, plus 1 free meridian cleansing treatment. Your meridians run smooth. Your comprehension has improved. Your physical abilities have increased dramatically, and the duration of your talent has been extended to 5 minutes, 1,000 kilometers, on my hands and knees, inside 1 year. I want that on a plaque somewhere. Also 5 minutes, from 10 seconds to 5 minutes. My talent had a battery, and the battery scaled with how strong I was, which meant the whole thing was a loop that fed itself, and I was standing at the bottom of it holding the ladder and the points. Simulation points are the hard currency of the main world, actual currency, the kind that only moves between simulators, the kind ordinary people don't have the right to touch. 1 point runs about 10,000 coins. Most people work a whole year and don't clear 10 points. I got 1,000 for crawling around my parents' floor. But money was the least of it. What I actually got was the important part. I wasn't going to catch that cold. The first line of my death schedule had a strike through it. 1 down. Now, about the world I'd landed in. I spent that first year listening because nobody watches what they say in front of a baby, and by the end of it I had the shape of the thing. Martial artists come in 3 grades: external strength, inner strength, and grandmaster. Each one splits into beginner, minor achievement, major achievement, and perfection, because every world in existence has to have tiers. External strength means you know a few basic techniques. You're tough, you're strong, and you are otherwise a person. Inner strength is where it gets fun. You've cultivated a thread of internal energy, you can scale walls and split stones, and at perfection, you can kill a buffalo with 1 punch. And a large caliber sniper rifle will still end you from 600 meters, because this is 2123 and nobody has told the guns about your buffalo. Grandmaster is the real line. A grandmaster absorbs damage with his own internal energy. Pistols stop mattering. Sniper rifles stop mattering. Killing one inside a crowded city basically requires armor and a plan. So there's an old rule in that world, older than any of the schools. Grandmasters must not be insulted. Back in the day, the word carried its own weather. And now there are laser rifles that a single special forces soldier can carry. There are nuclear weapons rated in the hundreds of millions of kilojoules per kilogram. There are orbital platforms that can put a beam through your roof from space. A new grandmaster shows up maybe once every several years, and when one does, he ranks somewhere below a mid-tier pop idol in the public imagination. So martial arts were dying, and everybody involved could feel it, and the honest ones had stopped pretending otherwise. Here's the part that kept me up. Guns don't work on the bazaar. I knew that from the other world, the one I'd woken up in 8 years ago, the one with the black mist and the whispering. Technology can delete things at the physical level, and it does absolutely nothing to the other kind. This world had a dark invasion coming. The introduction said so in the first paragraph, right above the part where they told me my difficulty was hell. And when it came, if the martial arts were gone, then everybody in it would be fish on a chopping board, neatly arranged, waiting. I was 1 year old and I had a main quest, and for the first time I actually wanted it. Rebuild the glory of the warriors. Fine. Let's rebuild it. The training ground at Qin Family Martial Hall was big enough for 200 people, and on a good morning it held 9. That's the whole diagnosis right there. My father had a hall with 2 centuries of history, a floor you could land a helicopter on, and 9 students doing warm-ups in the corner of it like the last customers in a restaurant that's about to close. I joined them at 2, not metaphorically. I put on a miniature training suit, walked out onto that floor, and started copying the movements, and I looked exactly as ridiculous as you're imagining. Big eyes, round face, absolutely no center of gravity. I threw a punch and my own body weight took me 2 steps sideways. I looked like a drunk trying to hail a cab. The students loved it. Junior brother, that's not how you punch. Slow down, don't hurt yourself. Practicing martial arts only improves your fitness, junior brother. You'd be better off studying hard and becoming a scientist. That last one was said kindly, which is what made it terrible. That's a man in a martial arts uniform on a martial arts floor telling a child not to bother. Nobody in that building thought this was a future. They thought it was a gym. It had taken me 3 days of solid crying to get onto that floor at all. My father said no because I was 2 and might hurt myself, and also because, and he said this out loud, to my face, there's no future in it. I switched to strategy, cry, escalate, be adorable, repeat. He folded on day 3, which tells you something about him that would matter a lot later. Everyone assumed I'd get bored in a week. I was on that floor first every single morning. Every punch at full force. Not a child's approximation of full force, and then the next one, and the one after that, with the talent running the whole time, and my head filling up with a running commentary that nobody else could hear. After practicing boxing once, my physical fitness improved significantly. Practice the punch 10 times, and you'll get the basics of Wind Thunder Fist. Practice 100 times, and your physical constitution and aspiration will improve. Practice 1,000 times. Wind Thunder Fist, major achievement. Practice 10,000 times. Breakthrough to external strength perfection. 10,000 punches. That's the whole trick. There is no trick. The system asks me to do a thing an insane number of times and then hands me the thing everyone else spends a decade on, and my only real talent is that I am willing to be that boring. I practiced in the morning. I practiced in the afternoon. I practiced at night. I practiced in my dreams, which sounds like a figure of speech and was not, because I checked and it counted. The students stopped laughing somewhere around month 2. By month 4, they'd started arriving earlier so they wouldn't be the last one in. By month 6, they were watching my hands. 6 months in, one morning, I stood in front of the test stakes and threw one punch. Nobody saw it. That's the part I enjoy. 12 grown men standing 8 meters away with their eyes open, and not one of them could tell you what happened, only that the air made a noise like distant thunder, and then the ironwood stake wasn't there anymore. It went to dust. Not splinters. Dust. In a cone. All over the floor. Those stakes are harder than steel. A small caliber pistol won't punch through one. That's the entire point of them. The silence lasted a while. Then somebody made a noise like a punctured tire. My father had been watching from behind a pillar, because of course he had, and when I turned around, his face had gone completely blank in the way faces do when the brain is still buffering, because it wasn't the stake. Anybody with enough beef can break wood. It was that the technique I'd used was Wind Thunder Fist taken to its highest expression, the thing at the end of the road, the part where a move stops being a move. Fist intent. Can a 2-year-old understand intent? Grown men train for 40 years and never touch it. There are veteran grandmasters who have never grasped a single one. If they hadn't watched it happen, they wouldn't have believed it if you beat them to death. Heaven-defying fate change. You grasped Wind Thunder Fist at age 2, resulting in a dramatic increase in your physical abilities. Main story progress, 3%. Reward, 2,000 simulation points. Heaven rewards. Diligence time increased to 2 hours. 2 hours. I stood in the dust of a stake that couldn't be broken and thought, in the tone of a man checking his phone, oh good, the battery's better. At which point I wished there were 24 hours in a day so I could spend all of them punching. 6 more months went by like a page turning. Practice standing meditation 10,000 times and your basic body movements will be perfect. Practice your footwork 10,000 times and your movement speed will increase dramatically. Practice your punches 100,000 times and your strength will reach inner strength minor achievement. Then one day my blood came up out of my body like smoke, my bones popped like a bag of beans hitting a wall, and I got several inches taller in about 4 seconds. And inside my meridians there was a new thing. Invisible, weightless, about as thick as a human hair, and useful for approximately everything. That's inner strength. The stuff the old men in the novels have. I put my hand flat on the training hall wall and closed my fingers, and tile and cement came away in my fist like wet tofu. It feels really, really good to become stronger. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. 2 years of crawling and punching and eating soup that tasted like a swamp, and then one morning you casually destroy a wall with your hand and stand there grinning at it like an idiot. Then I did the arithmetic, because I always do the arithmetic. 2 hours of talent, 6 full runs of Wind Thunder Fist. During the whole 2 hours, every part of my body is at peak condition. My raw aptitude is now better than most working martial artists in the country. One reaps 100-fold for one's efforts, which means 2 hours of my training equals 2 months of someone else's. I said that out loud to an empty room and then clicked my tongue because even I thought it was obscene. There was a catch. There's always a catch. Wind Thunder Fist is a third-rate technique. Common. The sort of thing you can buy in a market. And the quality of the technique determines the quality of the inner strength you condense from it, which is why mine was hair-thin instead of rope-thick. The real arts are a different species. Dragon Tiger Mountain's Golden Light Mantra, Shaolin's Yi Jin Jing and Tathagata Palm, Wudang's Pure Yang Wujigong. Those are the accumulated work of dozens of generations, locked in vaults behind rules older than the vaults, and outsiders do not get to look at them, ever. So I did what you do when you can't buy quality. If the quality isn't good enough, make up for it with quantity. I had someone go out and collect me every cheap, common, unglamorous technique they could find. Iron shirt, eagle claw, iron palm, something called leg that can cut off a child's future, which I assume was named by a very angry man. Practice iron shirt 1,000 times, and your physical defense will be greatly enhanced. Practice eagle claw 1,000 times. Major achievement. Capable of shattering rocks with a flick of the finger. Practice splitting the monument palm 1,000 times. Perfection. Understanding the pioneering concept. A dozen third-rate arts, each one taken to perfection, each one adding another concept to the pile, and the hair-thin thread in my meridians went from a hair to about the width of an earphone cord. Talent duration, 4 hours. Meanwhile, something else was happening that I hadn't planned for at all. The students had stopped humoring me. They were following me. My father's hall started filling up again, slowly, and a handful of the young ones who'd signed up to get fit quietly decided they were going to do this for the rest of their lives instead. My father, who had spent 10 years watching his family's business die, made me the young master of the hall at 2.5 years old and then went off somewhere to have a moment about it. I taught them what I could. It cost me nothing, and it turned out to matter enormously later, though not in the way I expected. Then I turned 3, and the ratings came round. Every martial arts school in the country gets graded, and the grade decides your annual stipend and your standing. Basic, intermediate, advanced, Dao level. Finish lasts 3 years running and you're finished. Full stop. Disqualified. My father had failed it twice already because of an old injury that never healed right. This was the last chance, and it was the exact hinge in my life script, the one where he goes up, gets destroyed in front of everyone by Master Haiyang, and the whole slide begins. So I went and told him I'd fight in his place. I have never seen a mild-tempered man get angry that fast. No, absolutely not. Father, do you know how dangerous the rating is? A fist has no eyes. Life or death is irrelevant. Every martial artist signs a death consent form before he goes on stage. He was shouting by then, which he never did. There are inner strength major achievement masters in this thing, and only the head or the deputy head of a school is qualified to go up. What are you, a little kid, doing getting involved? Then he said the part that I'm still not over. Even if I die on that stage, you absolutely cannot fight. He wasn't being dramatic, he genuinely meant it, and I could see the whole calculation running behind his eyes because he'd already done it and he'd already decided. I have mediocre talent. I've accomplished nothing. It doesn't matter if I die. But this boy is the most gifted descendant in the history of the Qin family, and if anything happens to him, I'll be a sinner against my own ancestors. That's the man I had for a father in that life. He'd worked it out, and he was fine with it. I didn't argue. Arguing is for people who can't do the other thing. I clenched my fist and threw one punch at nothing. The wind screamed. The air itself sparked. A pressure rolled out through that courtyard, and my father staggered and nearly went down on the flagstones, fist intent. Wind and thunder. And then while he was still standing there, I ran through the rest. Thunder kick, thunder palm, iron shirt, eagle claw, splitting the monument palm. More than a dozen of them, back to back, every single one at perfection, every single one carrying its own concept. He didn't move. He stood there like somebody had left a statue in his clothes. More than 10 kinds of concept, he said eventually, to nobody. How exactly did Xiao Yuan do that? Because a concept is the Grandmaster's mark. Grasp one and you'll get there eventually, even if it takes 50 years. Most Grandmasters never grasp one at all. I did a dozen in one breath, in a courtyard, wearing a shirt with a duck on it. My father agreed to let me fight. What else was he going to do? The next morning, I walked into the Martial Arts Association by myself. The hall was full, dozens of schools, and inner-strength martial artists everywhere, men you normally don't see 2 of in a year, standing around in clumps drinking tea and sizing each other up. When I came in, they assumed I was somebody's kid who'd wandered off. I am representing Qin Family Martial Hall, I said. I am here to participate in the rating. The place went up like a bar fight. Has Qin Baoshan gone mad? He's sending a 3-year-old to his death? Little friend, go home and drink your milk. This is not a place for you. People can die in here. Don't get scared and start crying for your mother later. The chief examiner didn't even laugh. He just started the process of disqualifying my school on the spot, which was worse because it was procedural. So I stopped where I was, breathed in, right leg drawn tight as a bowstring, a low ugly power turning over in it, and I stamped my foot. The building shook, twice. Dust came down off the rafters, gravel jumped, and the cement floor under me went out in a spiderweb 3 meters across with a crater sitting in the middle of it like a full stop. Everybody who'd been shouting stopped all at once like a switch had been thrown. Then somebody said, "Holy crap, what's going on?" And somebody else said quietly, in the voice of a man reading a diagnosis, "Qi blood like a dragon, qi flowing through the body. That's the mark of an inner strength martial artist. This guy is 3 years old?" How does a 3-year-old have that? Stop talking. Even at 30, I might not be able to beat him. Nobody suggested I go home after that. The format was simple. Everyone fights everyone, top 10 advance. I went through the field like a man walking through a beaded curtain, and at halftime a man with triangular eyes found me by the wall. Little kid. Friendly. Hand on my shoulder. The whole routine. How about letting me win the next round? Your Chin family Marshall Hall has already advanced. You won't be eliminated. Even if you keep fighting, you'll get, what, a few $100,000 a year in subsidies. But if you just give me a hand here, you name your price. I looked at the logo on his chest. Haiyang Martial Arts School. The school that ruined my family in the script. The school whose master crippled my father's shoulder in a ring like this one, 5 years before I was born, and then spent the next decade grinding what was left of him into the dirt for sport. I spread out 5 fingers. 50 million. I need the money in my account within 10 minutes. He didn't even flinch. Can. He was thrilled, actually. You could see him doing his own arithmetic behind his face. 50 million hurts, sure. But get into the top 3 at a national rating, and the reputation alone earns it back 10 times over. Young people are inexperienced. Young people are easily fooled. A few minutes later, my phone made a small, cheerful noise. Then they called us up. We stood opposite each other on the platform, and I told him the truth, which is a thing I do more often than people expect. I'll only throw one punch. If you can take it, I'll admit defeat. He opened his mouth to answer, and I was already moving. Fist intent, wind and thunder. He went 10 meters and hit the boards hard enough to raise a cloud. There was a long pause. Then he got one arm under himself and pushed up out of the blood, and pointed at me, and his eyes weren't angry so much as confused, like a man who's discovered the rules were never real. We just made an agreement. Really? I said. I was just kidding. I walked off the platform, without looking back. Behind me, he coughed once and didn't get up again. Everybody in that hall had signed the waiver. Life and death are irrelevant, it says so on the form. Nobody had grounds to say a single word. They said plenty anyway, just not to my face. Such ruthless methods. Is this really a 3-year-old child? This boy is ruthless and vicious. If he doesn't die young, he'll be a monster. We must never provoke him. I know how it looked. I'd like to say I agonized over it. I didn't. I'd read the script. I knew exactly what that school and its friends were going to do to my mother. The rest of the tournament was a formality. I took first place and I did not lose a round. By that evening, it was national news, and martial arts world in the capital was going quietly insane about it, and the association's leadership had opened a file. A lot of schools wrote down the name Chin Family Martial Hall. The ones who'd actually been in the building went further than that. I found out later they printed my photograph and handed a copy to every one of their disciples so that no idiot would wander into me by accident. 3 years old, and men with 30 years of training were circulating my picture like a wanted poster. I got home and the notification was waiting. Heaven-defying. You were a prodigy at a young age, taking your father's place in battle at the age of 3 and decisively defeating your opponent, successfully altering the simulation storyline. Main storyline completion, 10%. Rating upgraded to C. Activate part of the simulation mark. Gain 3,000 simulation points. You have acquired the temporary C-rank talent 9 bulls and 2 tigers, which you may use at any time. I sat down on the step outside my own front door and breathed out for what felt like the first time in 3 years. C rating. That's the line. That is the entire line. If I quit right there, right that second, walked out of the simulation and never came back, I'd still go home a full simulator. My friend with the shaking hands and his dishwashing mother and his father who serves like a slave, and me. And the difference between us was now permanent, and it had taken 3 years and 1 punch. And on top of it, a temporary talent card. Those don't transfer home the way permanent ones do. Use it here, lose it on the way out. But the young lords from established simulation families walk into their first run carrying several of these, which is exactly why they walk out with better ratings. They're expensive enough that most of those young lords still can't afford them. The one in my hand would sell for at least 10,000 points on the main world market, 100 million, converted. An ordinary person doesn't earn that in several lifetimes. Effect. Increases a person's strength by a great deal. No side effects. That's the whole card. It doesn't even try to be clever. I used it on myself immediately, obviously. Warm current, limbs, bones, the usual. And then, your physical abilities have been greatly enhanced. The duration of Heaven Rewards diligence has been increased to 6 hours. My strength had more than doubled. I threw a lazy punch in my own courtyard, and it made a sound like a whip crack. Master Haiyang, I thought. If you were still alive, I wouldn't need Wind Thunder Fist for you. I could do it with a finger. He wasn't, though. He'd sent an employee. My father was so happy that night that he couldn't sleep. He kept getting up to look at the trophy. Then, somewhere around 3 in the morning, he sat my mother down and made the single most upsetting decision of his life. He decided to send me to school, both of them, in the kitchen, at 3 in the morning, having a serious grown-up conversation about how to gently steer their genius child away from the thing he was a genius at. Martial arts are a thing of the past. The human body has limits. You can't punch your way past biology. If he applied that mind of his to studying, he'd go so much further. My father runs a martial arts hall. He is the 4th generation of a martial arts family. He said this out loud in his own house, standing under a photograph of his own grandfather, and he wasn't being cruel, he was being a parent. He'd looked at the world and decided that the thing he loved was a hobby, and his son deserved a career, and I could not tell him he was wrong. I couldn't say a word about it. First rule of the simulator. Leak the existence of the simulation to anyone inside it and you're eliminated on the spot. Not failed. Eliminated. So there was no version of that argument where I got to say, actually, in 4 decades this planet gets eaten and the only people left standing will be the ones who can punch. So I fell back on my ultimate technique, the one that had never once failed me, the one I'd been perfecting since I was 6 months old. First I cried, then I made a scene, then I acted cute. 3-stage combo, undefeated. My parents held out for about 40 minutes, but it stuck with me, that conversation, because it showed me the actual size of the problem. It wasn't Haiyang, it wasn't Red Lotus. It was that in this world, in the year 2126, a martial arts family didn't believe in martial arts. Everyone had quietly agreed it was over. And if I wanted the martial arts academy rebuilt, I couldn't punch my way to that. You can't punch a consensus. I had to change what everyone believed, which is a very large sentence for a 3-year-old, and I had no idea how to do it, so I went back to training and let the universe hand me the answer. It came in the form of my own students being idiots. They'd been filming me, for fun. A 3-year-old in a tiny training suit doing forms, and they cut it together and posted it as a joke, the way you post your dog doing something. It got tens of millions of views in about a day. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. My 3-year-old still wets the bed. Half the video is CGI, right? He's not even 4, and he's grasped a concept. Do you know how rare that is? A concept is harder to get than a degree from the top university in the country. Those old men sit in seclusion for 30 years hoping for one of these. This is an elementary schooler winning the Nobel Prize. 99% of the internet called it staged. But the 1% who actually knew what they were looking at went very quiet, because the footage didn't just show a kid throwing a good punch. There were coaching clips in it, me correcting the older students, and in those clips I was solving in 4 sentences the problems those men had been stuck on for years. That's the thing that scared them. Not the power. The insight. And then the comments section turned into a war. Grandmasters are not to be insulted. In ancient times, insulting a grandmaster was a capital offense. Martial arts have been abandoned by the times. Technology is the mainstream now. Only you pathetic wretches still cling to past glories. Tens of thousands of comments. #1 trending. Everybody yelling. And I sat there, a 21st century adult brain in a body that couldn't reach the sink. And I watched a couple of million people argue about whether martial artists were real. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's the lever. One man can only reach so far, but online, one man can reach everyone. So I announced a live demonstration, 3 days out, and I titled it about as subtly as a brick through a window. Is practicing martial arts useless? Are the photos staged? Then I'll use my fists to prove to you what a young grandmaster is. Trending in 10 minutes. Half the internet showed up to laugh. They're using a child for a publicity stunt now? Get social services in there. But the other half wasn't laughing at all, because it had been 10 years since a new grandmaster emerged anywhere in this country, 10 years of the whole discipline shrinking, and if there was even a chance the kid was real, that was a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of a dying thing. Everybody tuned in, including, it turned out, the people I actually wanted. I only found out about the wudang part much later, and when I did, I laughed for about a week. Chen Mingyuan, 70s, white beard down his chest, Dao robe, old grandmaster of Wudang Mountain, one of the most respected human beings alive. And he is sitting in a pavilion on a sacred mountain trying to operate a short video app with one finger, the way old men do, like the phone is a small animal that might bite. He tapped something wrong and landed in a live dance stream. Hey bro, you want to send some gifts? Sending rockets comes with perks. I can even add you on WeChat. She had no idea she was flirting with a 70-year-old sect leader who had signed up under his real name because it never occurred to him to do anything else. The world is going to the dogs, he said. And then he looked again, which is exactly when his granddaughter arrived. Shameless old man, Lin Ruoxi, 6 years old, pink dress, absolutely no fear of anybody on that mountain. She confiscated the phone the way a customs officer confiscates a suitcase, and while scrolling she found my video. What young grandmaster? He's just a little kid. A pause. But he's quite cute. Her grandfather wasn't listening anymore. He'd seen the punch and his pupils were shaking because unlike 400 million commenters, he could see straight through to the bottom of it in one glance. Lin Ruoxi was not impressed. Lin Ruoxi was, in fact, extremely annoyed. Tch! What's so great about fist intent? I can use Tai Chi's sword intent. And here's the part that isn't a joke. She could. 6 years old, inner strength minor achievement, an intent of her own, a once-in-a-century talent on a mountain full of once-in-a-lifetime talents who had just been told by the internet that some toddler in the capital was better than her. Remember her. She matters more than anyone else in this entire story, and neither of us knew it yet. The same scene was happening at Shaolin, at Emi, at Dragon Tiger Mountain, old men in robes, squinting at phones. 3 days later, I walked out in front of a camera in a little white training suit, looking like the mascot of a cereal brand with 500,000 people watching at once. Then the gold verified accounts started coming in, and the chat lost its mind. Wudong Chenming Yuan has entered the room. MA Master Jingxian has entered the room. Shaolin Dashuan Great Master has entered the room. Dragon Tiger Mountain Old Celestial Master has entered the room. I can brag about this for the rest of my life. Are these real? These are real. Those are real people. I'm going to faint. First demonstration. I picked up a 50-kilo barbell plate and closed my hand on it, and it folded up into scrap metal like I was crushing a paper cup. The internet was unmoved, chopping bricks, street performance stuff. Who says the iron's real? I can crush a plate too if it's made of foam. Fair enough. Second demonstration. I walked over to the flower bed at the edge of the yard and picked a leaf off a bush. Just a leaf. Then I flicked it. It went through an ironwood stake, the kind that stops a pistol round, and kept going, and buried itself in a wall 10 meters past that. There was a solid 3 seconds of absolute silence on a live stream with 500,000 people in it. Then, this is the first time I've ever watched a live stream while kneeling, but there are always holdouts, and the holdouts were loud. A large caliber pistol can also punch through a stake. This proves nothing. Have you not seen the new American gene enhancement drug? An ordinary man on that stuff can wipe out a whole group of inner strength martial artists. Your kung fu is a museum piece. Okay, I stopped performing and stood still. I reached out into the air with an open hand and closed it slowly, like a man catching something that isn't there, like shaking hands with the wind. Then I pointed 2 fingers and I slashed. A blade of solid visible energy came off my hand and went through the training stakes and through the tables and through the chairs and then through the ground and left a crack more than 10 meters long across the yard of my father's martial arts hall. Every grandmaster watching stood straight up out of his chair on 4 different mountains at the same time. I've been told Chen Mingyuan nearly dropped the phone off the balcony. To wield the wind as a blade, he said, and cleave a river with a single finger. Only Marshal Dao Peak can do that. Grandpa, what's Marshal Dao Peak? The end of the road, Yao Yao. One man is an army. Unless the state deploys the military, even a group of grandmasters can do nothing to him. In my sect, only the founder, Chen Immortal Master, and the Dharma Ancestral Master ever reached that realm. So you can't beat this little kid? The old man was quiet for a moment. In raw strength, I'm slightly better. In skill, I couldn't catch him in a lifetime. The viewer count went past 10 million. Heaven-defying fate change. You changed the perceptions of the vast majority of people, significantly impacting the development of the world. Main storyline, 15%. Rating upgraded to B, 10,000 simulation points. I stood in a cracked courtyard with a leaf-shaped hole in my father's wall and thought, right. So belief is a resource, and I can farm it. Then the golden comments started arriving, and I discovered that the most respected spiritual leaders in the country have absolutely no shame whatsoever. Heroes emerge from among the young. The doors of Shaolin will always be open to young friend Qin. Shameless. That old monk looked so honest. Dragon Tiger Mountain would like to extend an invitation. Ma Mountain is teeming with beautiful women. Young friend Qin is most welcome. That one's from a nunnery, by the way. And then Wudang, from Chen Mingyuan's own account, in front of 10 million people. Wudang has countless martial arts secret manuals. Young friend Qin may feel free to browse. I have to explain how insane that is. Sects do not open their scripture pavilions. Not to friends, not to allies, not to anyone whose surname isn't theirs. Wudang's own founder, Chen Immortal Master, was thrown out of Shaolin for the crime of teaching himself Luohan Fist by watching. That's the culture. That's 1,000 years of that culture. And this old man just offered the whole library to a stranger's kid, live, because he'd decided the survival of the entire discipline was worth more than the rule. The aftermath was ridiculous. Billions of views. Qin Family Martial Hall got renamed Martial Extremes Dao Hall and opened a dozen branches across the capital inside a year. Tens of thousands of students. My father went from 9 men doing warm-ups to a waiting list, and one evening he came to me holding a stack of documents like they were on fire. Land certificates, 10 courtyard houses, effectively an entire street in the center of the capital. Your great-grandfather never drank and never smoked, he said. His only hobby was buying land. Your grandfather and I only ever knew how to live off the savings. He pushed the stack into my hands. From this day forward, you are the rightful owner of Qin Family Martial Hall. It was the proudest moment of his life. I sold every single property the next morning, 2 billion yuan, and I spent it, all of it, in about 3 weeks. Century-old Ganoderma, 1,000-year ginseng, deep-sea blood coral. I bought legendary medicinal treasures the way a normal person buys cabbage, because I had 8 hours a day of hundredfold returns and a body that would absorb anything I put in it. Money is only ever a battery for time. Then I announced I was going into seclusion and told my father not to expect me out until I was a grandmaster. He was 5 years from believing martial arts had a future. I gave him 2 years in one room. I'm not going to pretend there's a story in the middle of it. Seclusion isn't a montage. It's the same day happening 700 times, and by the end of it, the air in that room moved when I breathed. Not poetically, literally. Inhale, and the curtains went flat against the wall. Then one morning my pores opened all at once, and black blood came out of my skin, years of impurities getting evicted, and I understood that I'd been holding myself back without meaning to. I'd hit Grandmaster months earlier. My bones just hadn't finished growing, so my body had quietly capped itself rather than tear apart. A 5-year-old skeleton can only be asked to do so much. That morning, it stopped asking. The pressure came up out of my dantian, and there was a sound like 100 small explosions, and every table and chair in the room came apart into splinters at the same instant, and I stood in the middle of it with something new coming off my skin. Inner strength, released outside the body. Qi, visible, wrapped around me like a second layer of clothing. That's a grandmaster. If you want the difference in one line, inner strength is gasoline, protective aura is rocket fuel, same fire, different category of thing entirely. Heaven-defying fate change. At the age of 5, you became a grandmaster and reset the world's understanding of cultivation. From this day forward, you no longer fear destiny. Destiny is in your hands. Main storyline, 30%. Rating upgraded to A, 30,000 simulation points. Heaven rewards. Diligence duration increased to 8 hours. You have obtained the C-rank temporary talent, a flash of brilliance. When you are stuck on a difficult problem, this may hand you the answer. A rating, 5 years old, and a card that thinks for me, which I filed away for later and then forgot about for a while because I had a party to throw. That's not a joke, it's the custom. Every new grandmaster holds a banquet. It's broadcast nationally, and anyone who wants to test you turns up and gets to swing. Beat them all, and you're confirmed. Lose one, and you're a laughing stock for the rest of your life. Most new grandmasters wait 2 or 3 years first. Consolidate, get comfortable, make sure nobody catches you at a bad angle. I sent the invitations the same week. It had been 20 years since the last new grandmaster in this country. 20. The capital physically could not hold the number of people who came. Hermits who hadn't been photographed in decades walked down off their mountains just to look at my face. Chen Mingyuan traveled in person. The first hour went the way I expected. A run of skeptics came up one at a time to see if the child was real, and I swept them off in the order they arrived, politely, without breaking anything expensive. Then Chen Mingyuan asked for a spar, and that one was actually fun. Dozens of exchanges in front of a national broadcast, an old man in a Dao robe moving like water going downhill, and the commentators screaming that it was even. It wasn't even, he knew it wasn't, and at the end of it, he stepped back in front of the entire country and said out loud that he'd lost. Do you know what that costs a man like him? He gave it away like small change, because he decided that the discipline dying was worse than his pride bruising, and he was going to spend everything he had on making people believe again. I bowed to him properly. And then I saw the man in the corner, hook-nosed, inner strength major achievement, so strong enough to be in the room and nowhere near strong enough to matter. He was standing with a drink he wasn't drinking, watching me get congratulated, and his face was doing the thing faces do when a man is calculating how much he hates you. What's so great about him? I knew that face. I'd read that face in a document, in a hibernation pod, 400 and something years in the future. That's the chief martial master. That's the ant. In the script I was handed, the one where I stay average and my father stays broken. That man works his way into our hall, takes the family business out from under us, and then kills my parents. Not in a duel. Not in some grand tragic betrayal. He just does it, the way you'd clear a table. He was standing 30 feet from my mother, holding a glass of my father's wine. I stood up. The killing intent came off me before I decided to let it, and the whole hall felt it. 300 martial artists all going still at once, like birds when a shadow passes. I walked over to him and I bowed, deeply. Formally, hands together, back straight, the full old-fashioned salute you'd give a respected elder. The room went white. Because that particular bow, in that particular world, doesn't mean respect. It means a life and death challenge. It means the two of us walk out and only one comes back, and it means that anyone who interferes has made an enemy of me personally. Please, I said. He didn't stand up. He went down. Straight onto his knees in front of a national broadcast, crying, "Grandmaster Qin, there must be some misunderstanding. I've never even met you." He hadn't. That's the thing. In this timeline, he'd done nothing yet. He was a mid-level martial artist with a bad attitude and a grudge he'd had for 11 minutes. I know exactly how that sounds. I'm not going to dress it up. I turned to the camera instead. "This person," I said, "is connected to the Red Lotus sect." The banquet stopped being a banquet. Here's what the Red Lotus sect is, for those of you who've been lucky. They're a technology cult. Their doctrine is that martial artists are a scourge left over from the old era, that flesh is a dead end, and that the only thing that has ever moved humanity forward is machinery. They believe this the way people believe in gods. They've abducted martial artists for genetic experiments. They've assassinated grandmasters. And a few years before I was born, they hijacked a strategic bomber and dropped the largest non-nuclear weapon ever built on Shaolin Temple. 1,500 years of history, gone in an afternoon. That's the mortal enemy of the entire martial arts world, and I had just pointed at a man in a banquet hall and put his name in the same sentence. He stopped crying, then he pulled a syringe out of his jacket and put it into his own neck. Bright green. His flesh came apart and rebuilt itself in about 4 seconds. His bones thickened, his meridians widened, and the aura coming off him climbed straight past mine. Everybody in that hall was screaming at me to move. I stood there with my hands at my sides and watched, because I wanted the numbers. "Speed, strength, and reaction, no less than a grandmaster's," I said, out loud, to the room, like a man reading a spec sheet. A single dose multiplies a man's strength at least 5 times. The only apparent drawback is that the user loses part of his sanity. That's the technology they've been building while everyone argued about whether Kung Fu was real. One injection, and a mid-tier thug becomes something that can kill an old master. You can mass-produce that. You cannot mass-produce Chen Mingyuan. Then the thing came at me and I threw one punch. Fist intent. Wind and thunder. It went across the hall and it didn't get up, and I hadn't changed expression the entire time. Someone told me later it was like watching a man swat a fly at dinner. They dragged what was left out through the service entrance. The banquet resumed. People drank. Chen Mingyuan found me afterwards out on the terrace and he wasn't celebrating. "Young friend Qin, you're in trouble. You just killed one of theirs in public, on television." So I asked him the question I'd been sitting on all night. Why Shaolin? Why did they bomb Shaolin specifically? The old man didn't answer for a long time, long enough that I knew the answer was going to be bad. "All martial arts under heaven originated from Shaolin," he said. 50 years ago, the man who kept the scripture pavilion was already at Grandmaster Great Perfection. 10 years ago, he was half a step from Martial Dao Peak. He could have broken through at any moment. And there are people in higher positions who did not want to see him take that step. I want you to sit with that, because it took me a second. The Red Lotus sect didn't decide to bomb Shaolin. The Red Lotus sect got permission. "Think about it," he said, and he wasn't looking at me anymore. "Why can ordinary people be made to work themselves into the ground and say nothing? Why do they swallow a stolen home, an unfinished building, a broken promise, and go quietly back to work the next morning? Because they can be harvested. Because there is nothing else they can do. And a martial artist can do something. A knight-errant breaks the law with violence. That is the phrase they use. One man with a concept in his fist does not care about your paperwork." He shook his head slowly. "Power that cannot be controlled is not tolerated. Stability is paramount. The decline of martial arts is not an accident of history, young friend. It is policy. The Red Lotus sect is only the glove." Then he gave me the advice, and I could hear how much he hated giving it. "Stop here. Keep your head down. Enjoy what you've built. Otherwise, you will bring death on yourself and on your family." "Are you suggesting I back down?" He didn't answer that either, and for the first time since I'd been born into that world, I felt actual pressure in my chest, not fear of a man. I'd never been afraid of a man. But everything I'd fought so far had been a person, and a person can be punched. What I was standing against now wasn't a force with a headquarters, it was the direction an entire era had decided to move in. Heaven-defying fate change. At 5 years old, you became a grandmaster and publicly slew your enemy. 3,000 points. Main storyline completion, 30%, 3,000. After I'd killed the man who murders my parents in the original script, and the storyline didn't move a single percent. That's the system telling me something, and the system does not do subtlety. The chief martial master was never the plot. He was a symptom. I'd spent my big dramatic moment executing a mosquito. So now I had 2 walls in front of me and no door in either. Wall 1. The storyline was stuck at 30% and I had no idea what it wanted. Wall 2, which was worse, was that I'd hit a ceiling. All those dozens of arts I'd taken to perfection were third-rate arts, the cheap stuff you can buy in a market. Stack them as high as you like, and they carry you to Transcendent Grandmaster and stop. The real techniques belong to the ancient schools, guarded like nuclear codes, taught only to core disciples raised inside the walls, and I couldn't just go and become a disciple. 2 reasons. First, I already had skills, and in that world showing up at a sect gate carrying another school's arts is a taboo bordering on an insult. Second, and funnier, I was already a grandmaster. I was their equal. There is no polite mechanism by which an equal asks to be adopted. So I sat down in a quiet room and burned a flash of brilliance. I do not recommend it. It's like doing a full day's manual labor inside your own skull in about 11 minutes. My brain went hot. Everything I'd ever read started colliding with everything else, and I sat there sweating with my eyes shut while the card went through my memory like a man going through a filing cabinet with a shovel. Then it stopped, and I had it. Years back, in my old life, I'd read about a boxing champion who went to a traditional dojo, challenged them, lost, and was beaten to death on the floor. And nobody was charged. Nobody even investigated, because that's the rule. That is a real rule, and it's ancient. Challenge a dojo and lose, and the dojo disposes of you as it likes. Family, police, state, nobody may interfere. You waived all of that when you walked in, but challenge a dojo and win, and the dojo must grant you one condition, any condition. I started laughing in that empty room. Advanced martial arts are not to be lent out to outsiders. Fine. Perfect. Then I'll just keep hitting you until you lend them to me. And the second half of it was even better, because every one of those challenges could be broadcast. Every fight was another 10 million people watching a martial artist do something impossible on a Tuesday afternoon. The thing I'd been trying to farm, belief, was going to grow on the same tree as the thing I needed to get stronger. I called a press conference the next morning and announced that I was going south and that I intended to challenge every major martial arts school in the country. The reaction was not warm. He's a 5-year-old grandmaster with a hall in the capital and a fortune and a family. Why would he throw that away? He's just made an enemy of the Red Lotus sect, and now he wants to make an enemy of the entire martial arts world as well. Is he trying to get everyone killed? Arrogance. That's all this is. He's won a few fights, and now he thinks the old schools are decorations. One man spoke up for me. Chen Mingyuan went on record and said that today's martial arts world is a lake that is drying out and that it is better to break every convention we have than to sit politely on the shore and wait to die. He got shouted down inside a day. I packed one bag. I went south. First stop, Kangzhou. There's a saying about it. The arts of Tai Chi bring peace to the world. The arts of Bajiquan bring stability to the universe. The Wu family had been in that city for centuries. Their disciples were in the military, in business, in politics. They supplied personal bodyguards to the royal family, and a former head of the house had been martial arts instructor to the current emperor. If you wanted to pick the single worst door in the country to knock on, that was the one. And I knocked on it on purpose because I wanted the whole country watching when it opened. I sent a visiting card, which is the formal way of doing it. The hall master went the color of old paper. The disciples' eyes went red. There's a phrase for how they take it. The grudge of challenging someone to a competition is like the grudge of killing one's parents. Within an hour, the sect leader's order had gone out recalling every disciple they had from every country they were in. Generals were reserving seats. 3 days later, the hall was packed to the walls. Wu Zhong came out first. Current hallmaster, black attire, moved like a man who'd never lost anything in his life. And he was good, genuinely, properly good, the sort of good that takes 40 years. Your skills are excellent, I told him, but your concept is lacking. Go and get your old hallmaster. He did not take that well. He lasted under 3 exchanges. I put him across his own floor. Then the disciples came up in a line, and this part I remember because of how the room changed. These weren't amateurs, 2-star military martial artists, men out of border special forces, the kind of people who are the most dangerous person in any building they walk into. Clay chickens and earthen dogs, all of them. They'd been opening champagne at the halfway mark, back when it was still a story about a child getting taught a lesson. By the end of the line, nobody was drinking, and I could see it happening on their faces, the thing that's much worse than losing a fight. Their faith was going. Could it be that our Bajiquan lineage really has no talent left in it? Have we been guarding an empty box? Then Wu Zhong turned to face the back courtyard and dropped to his knees. The culprit Wu Zhong is outmatched and has caused Kangzhou Daoguan to lose face. We humbly request the old hall master emerge from seclusion. And every disciple in that hall went down with him and roared it with him. For half an hour, until their voices broke. Nothing happened. And then a gate that had been sealed for 20 years came off its hinges. The man who walked through it was in his 60s, gray hair, black clothes, a face like weathered rock, and killing intent rolling ahead of him like a dragon walking. Zhou Chang, major achievement at 10, grandmaster at 30, crossed the entire country on nothing but 2 iron fists and came out the other side with a name attached, Iron Palm, chief martial instructor to the royal family. He went to Shaolin 3 separate times to break the 18 bronze men formation alone and got stopped at the scripture pavilion door every time, great grandmaster at 50, and then something happened and he shut himself in a room and stayed there for 20 years. As a young grandmaster with a bright future, he said, "Why are you being so aggressive?" He looked past me at the wreckage of his hall. "You've injured my disciples and ruined my school's reputation. What exactly is it that you want?" "I've long heard of Baji Fist's fierce attacks," I said. "Junior simply wants to look at the boxing manual." The hall detonated. Somebody had to be physically restrained. Zhou Chang didn't shout. He stomped once. The floor of that venue cracked outward from his foot in lines that went somewhere and didn't stop. Then he came off the ground like an eagle dropping. Fist intent. Mountain collapse. His left fist arriving like something fired out of a barrel, his leg sweeping across at the same time like an axe the size of a door, the whole essence of Baji in one motion. Collapse, drill, shake, stick, lean. Every hair on my body stood up. I hadn't felt that in years. Actual danger. The specific sensation of being in a fight where the other person can kill you, which I hadn't experienced since before I could walk. I want to be honest about what happened next because it's my favorite part of the whole life. I got wrecked. I threw everything I had, dozens of arts, everyone at perfection, and he went through them like a man walking through wet paper. Third-rate skills against a genuine advanced technique isn't a contest, it's a category error. He put a fist into my shoulder, and I went dozens of meters backwards, and when I got up, my left arm was hanging wrong, and there was blood running off my fingers, and the audience finally understood why the boy had come south. That's it. That's the whole answer. They'd all been calling it arrogance for a month. And now they were watching the arrogant child get folded in half, and every one of them worked it out at once. Next to a real technique, everything I taught myself was a toy. The title Iron Palm is truly well-deserved, I told him, and I spat blood on his nice floor. Then I played my last card. Heaven rewards diligence. On. One reaps 100-fold for one's efforts. And I want to be precise about what that means in a fight, because it took the whole hall about 10 minutes to catch on. It doesn't mean I punch harder. It means every single exchange between us, every block, every read, every time he hit me, pays me back 100 times over in experience. He was teaching me, at 100 times speed, against his will. As long as you don't get killed, you have a chance to turn the table. What the audience saw was a small boy who would not die. He'd get hit, go across the floor, get up, come back in, and be very slightly better than he was 90 seconds ago. Over and over, like arguing with a cockroach. What I saw was a wall of text, clashed with formidable enemies, combat experience greatly enhanced, inner strength honed in battle, breakthrough to major achievement grandmaster, move perfected, multiple skills seamlessly integrated. Half an hour in, we were even. An hour in, I had the upper hand. 2 hours in, I made a sound like a dragon and a tiger arguing, took every third-rate art I owned, and fused them into a single punch. Zhou Chang left the ground and left a long trail behind him when he landed. The hall was silent. He got up on his own, dusted himself off, and walked back over to me. "New talents emerge in every generation," he said. "I am willing to accept defeat. I will personally present you with the Baji Fist Sutra." His disciples wept, openly. I'd been braced for something ugly, and instead the old man turned around and told them off. In the martial arts world, strength reigns supreme. Whoever has the bigger fist is right. I did exactly the same thing in my day, and none of you were crying about it then. Then he looked at me the way my father never quite managed to. Cultivating third-rate skills with your talent is a waste of a life. With the Baji Fist Sutra, you might reach martial Dao peak within 20 years. There was that phrase again, so I asked what it actually was. "The end of the road," he said. "Like Avalokiteshvara, like Chen Immortal Master, fly through the air, spit out swords, invincible in the human realm." He stopped, then, quieter. "But so what? In an age like this one, no matter how strong your martial arts are, in the end, it's all for nothing. Senior, you are mistaken." I bowed to him with the arm that still worked. The path of martial arts is like rowing against the current. Rebuilding the glory of the warriors is our inescapable duty. He smiled at that, and it was the saddest thing I saw in that entire world. Because he'd said it too, once. Word for word, probably, at about 30, with both fists intact. I found out later what he was thinking while he stood there. Back then, because of that incident, my Dao heart was damaged and never recovered, but he is still young, and more talented than I ever was. Perhaps he really can do it. The clip went everywhere. Rebuilding the glory of the warriors is our inescapable duty became a line people put in their profiles. Young people who'd never thought about it twice started signing up at martial arts halls. Something that had been sliding downhill for 50 years wobbled and, for the first time, didn't. And in a laboratory in the capital, a man in a white coat watched the same footage. I didn't know he existed yet. Wang Kong, 30s, black-rimmed glasses, the general appearance of a professor on a science program. High officials treated him as an honored guest. The emperor called him a national hero. Bajiquan's hall actually lost? He rewound it. Something isn't right. This boy's growth rate is abnormal. He asked for my complete file and the full recording. He told his people to watch my movements and report anything unusual immediately. He has been causing trouble for so long. He has to stop. If it gets out of control, send someone from Dragon Group. And then, to nobody. Project Arc has reached a critical point. We cannot afford any mistakes. Remember that name too. Both of them. Zhou Chang brought me the sutra himself. Not a servant, not a disciple. He carried it out with both hands. And now I understood the actual difference. The one nobody had ever explained to me, because nobody who knows is allowed to say it out loud. An advanced art isn't a better punch. It carries a mind cultivation technique with it, a specific, exquisite way of circulating inner strength that centuries of dead men refined and wrote down. Practice once, and you're a beginner. Practice 100 times, and you grasp the essence. Practice 1,000 times. Perfection. Switched primary art to Ba-Ji Fist. Realm advanced to Grandmaster Perfection. Heaven rewards diligence duration increased to 12 hours. I stayed a month in Kangzhou. By the end of it, their training ground looked like it had been shelled. The thread of inner strength in my meridians went from the thickness of a pencil to the thickness of a baby's arm, and dozens of times denser than that comparison suggests. Zhou Chang, the most gifted Bajiquan prodigy in 100 years, the man they call Iron Palm, took 10 years to reach the perfection I hit in a month. And I did it while also welding Ba-Ji onto every third-rate art I already owned, which is a thing that isn't supposed to be possible, and which I did mostly because nobody had told me it wasn't. The disciples stopped hating me somewhere in week 2. You can watch a person's resentment convert into something else in real time if you're around long enough. It's not that our art is weak, they decided. It's that this specific child is a freak of nature. I'll take it. Before I left, the old man walked me to the gate and gave me one last thing, and it wasn't a technique. The Red Lotus sect is hateful, he said. But the Dragon Group is the one you must be most wary of. Then he told me about the incident. At 50, at the height of everything, Great Grandmaster, storming the gates of Martial Dao Peak close enough to touch it, the Red Lotus sect ambushed him, and he'd have survived the Red Lotus sect. He was quite clear about that. Then the Dragon Group experts arrived. He crawled out of it with injuries that never healed and a spirit that never came back, and he closed a door behind him and stayed there for 20 years, and that is the entire reason this country has no Martial Dao Peak in it. Dragon Group is the court's special operations department. It answers to the royal family and nobody else. It recruited the finest martial artists in the nation, and it is arguably the single strongest force in the martial arts world. And the man telling me this had trained them, personally, as royal chief instructor, which means the country's own blade and the technology cult that bombed Shaolin were holding hands, and had been for a long time. I said thank you, and I went back on the road, and I stayed there for 10 years. Wudong, where I sat and talked about the Tao with an old man who'd once nearly dropped his phone off a balcony because of me. Dragon Tiger Mountain. A night on Ime Mountain trading moves with a sect leader who was as beautiful as advertised and considerably more dangerous. Dragon Ridge. Changbai Mountain, hunting hermits who hadn't spoken to an outsider in 40 years. And Shaolin. The Scripture Pavilion. I stood on a peak above the clouds with the sweeping monk, a man whose job title is janitor and whose actual job is being the most terrifying person on that mountain. And we traded everything we'd each learned in a lifetime, and his lifetime was considerably longer than mine. Thousands of schools, 10 years of being laughed at, doubted, told to go home, and refused at the gate before being let in through it, and dozens of assassination attempts, which I survived, which is the only reason I can tell you about them. 10 years of drinking ice cannot cool the burning passion in a man's blood. I came back out at 15, and there was a squad waiting for me. Quick summary of what 10 years bought, because I'm proud of it, and this is my story. I was the youngest great grandmaster in a century. The video series, someone had named it Southward Journey to discuss martial arts without asking me, had gone global. Hundreds of millions of subscribers. There was a serious argument going on about whether I was the biggest content creator on the planet, which is a sentence I never expected to apply to me in any life. Martial Extremes Dao Hall had hundreds of branches across the country and had started opening them abroad. And the number that actually mattered. When I was 5, this country had 2 million registered martial artists. When I was 15, it had 5 million. I did that. Me. One person with a camera crew and a very stupid amount of free time, which is of course exactly why they finally came for me. It happened in a mountain range down in Lingnan. A big man in a black trench coat was standing in the middle of the road, and he'd clearly been standing there a while. "You've gone too far," he said. "Stop here. Don't go any further." Bald head, shoulders like a doorway. I'd seen the file. Ye Tiansheng, head of the Dragon Group, the single strongest martial artist in the Imperial Palace's service. Here's the part I didn't expect. He wasn't being a thug about it. He genuinely admired me. You could hear it. "The decline of martial arts is a foregone conclusion, young man. It was decided long before you were born. If you insist on going your own way, you're going to get yourself killed, and it will be a waste." He was trying to save my life. He'd come out personally to do it. "I've heard Senior is hailed as the #1 martial arts master in the country," I said, and I stepped forward and put my fist into my palm. "Junior is not very talented. I humbly request Senior's guidance." "You want to talk about it?" "Debating scriptures only hinders brain development. Fists are the answer to everything." He smiled. He actually smiled. Right, I thought. That's a man after my own heart, and now I have to fight him. 2 seconds in, I found out how badly I'd misjudged the situation. He wasn't a great grandmaster. He was Marshal Dao Peak. The end of the road, the thing Chen Mingyuan talked about like a religion, and it was standing in a mountain road in a trench coat. Except something was wrong with it. His realm was real, and his strength didn't match it, like a man with a lifetime's credentials and no lifetime behind them. I found out later he'd taken some kind of secret medicine, a shortcut that burned out every drop of potential he'd ever had and dragged him up to a height his body couldn't actually hold. He was still, by a comfortable margin, the hardest fight of my life. It went a full day and a night. We flattened part of a mountain range. By the end, there wasn't one unwounded patch of skin left on me, and I mean that literally. My back, my ribs, my hands, all of it. But he was fighting a 15-year-old with a 100-fold return on every single exchange, and after 20-some hours, the arithmetic does what arithmetic does. He broke off and ran, bleeding, and I let him, because I couldn't have stopped him with what I had left. His backup squad arrived a while later. 5 Dragon Group operatives standing in a crater the size of a district, looking at hills that weren't hills anymore. No trace of Qin Lan. It appears the captain has failed. This must be reported to Dr. Chen immediately. I spent the next 2 months in a secret room on Wudong Mountain putting myself back together, and while I was in there, the system finally paid out. Heaven-defying fate change. You single-handedly promoted the martial tradition and temporarily delayed its decline. 20,000 simulation points. Main storyline completion, 60%. Rating upgraded to S strength has broken through Great Grandmaster. Heaven rewards diligence duration increased to 20 hours. The 5 obstacles calamity has been postponed by 20 years. I sat up so fast I reopened 3 wounds, because nobody had told me there was a 5 obstacles calamity. That was the first time those words had ever appeared in front of me, and I had to go and look it up in my own system menu like a man reading the terms and conditions after he's already signed. Here it is, in plain language. A simulator is not from the world he's simulating. The world knows. The world's will can feel a foreign body sitting inside it, and the longer you stay, the harder it pushes back. Most simulators get about 40 years before it starts. Then your senses shut down one at a time. You stop being able to see, then hear, then speak, then smell, then move. Your cognition goes crooked. And it isn't an illusion or a debuff. It's real damage that ignores your realm entirely. It does not care that you can level a mountain. It ends in madness, and then it ends. The only thing that pushes it back is the world itself recognizing you, being wanted here, belonging. I had 15 years on the clock, and I just bought 20 more by being famous enough that the planet decided it liked having me around. That is the single strangest survival mechanic I have ever been handed, and I want to point out that I'd stumbled into it entirely by accident. I hadn't been farming belief to stay alive. I'd been farming it because I wanted a martial arts academy. 45 years left. Fine, that's a lot of years. Then my phone buzzed with an advertisement, and everything else stopped mattering. The VR game Ark is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Tune in at 8 p.m. Built by Dr. Chen and a team from the Academy of Sciences on an entirely new virtual engine, delivering a 100% realistic experience. New players receive a free headset. Dr. Chen, I pulled his file and I read it twice, because the first time I assumed it was fan fiction. Wong Kong sat the college entrance exam at 8 years old. He had degrees from both of the country's top 2 universities by 10. Masters and multiple doctorates at 12. He built a working artificial intelligence prototype at 15. He is the youngest academician in the history of the nation, father of modern artificial intelligence, founder of the quantum engine, pioneer of gene technology, single-handedly credited with pushing human technology forward by more than 30 years. I sat on a stone bed on Wudong Mountain with a phone in my hand and thought, for one genuinely alarming moment, is he a simulator too? He can't be. It's not possible. A low-level world like this one is a single-player game, one simulator per world, that's the whole design. So he was just a man. A real, homegrown, born-here human being who happened to be the most brilliant person the species had produced in 1,000 years. And here was the thing I couldn't make fit. Why would the greatest scientist of the century pour his entire life into a video game? I turned that over for about 6 months and got nowhere, mostly because I got distracted. When I finally walked out of that secret room, there was a girl waiting outside it, and she'd been waiting a while. Pink dress, because of course it was. Lin Ruoxi was 18 now. Black hair down her back like water going over a ledge, and the sort of face that makes a room reorganize itself. There's a phrase they used about her in the press, a peach blossom blooming in the dead of winter, and I remember thinking that whoever wrote it had clearly met her because it caught the temperature exactly. Your injuries have healed? 3 years older than me. Also, at that point, the youngest female sect leader in the history of MA. I want to lay out her resume because it embarrasses mine at the same age. Tai Chi Fist Intent at 7. Grandmaster at 18. Grandfather is Chen Mingyuan of Wudong. Grandmother is Master Jingxin of Imei. Her father directs the Martial Arts Association, and her mother is a personal confidant of the Queen. When she got the Imei post, half the martial world muttered that it was rigged. Then they looked up the family and stopped muttering, partly out of respect and mostly out of self-preservation. And this magnificent, terrifying, politically untouchable woman had been my fan since she was 6 years old and I was 3. She'd heard I was hurt, walked out of a sect leader's duties on Imei Mountain, and come straight to Wudong to sit outside a door. The 6 months after that were the happiest I'd been since I was born into that world, and I'm including everything. I read martial classics in the mornings in a library nobody outside that mountain has ever been allowed into. In the afternoons we sparred, and she was good enough that I had to actually pay attention, which almost nobody on the planet could still make me do. In the evenings, we argued about which sect's sword forms were prettier, which is a genuinely stupid argument that we had approximately 40 times. I got stronger just by being there. Some of that was the mountain. Most of it wasn't. I was 15, and she was 18, and neither of us said anything about it, because there was a war coming, and we both knew it. Then I turned 16, and I felt the last door start to open. Year 21, 39, 16 years old, and I could feel Martial Dao Peak sitting there like a door left ajar. Which meant I had a problem, and the problem had a name, and it was Zhou Chang. Because a breakthrough at that level takes days, and during those days you cannot be disturbed, not shouldn't, cannot. Interrupt a man mid-breakthrough and you don't delay him, you break him permanently. That's what happened to Zhou Chang at 50. That's what happened to the sweeping monk. 2 of the strongest men who ever lived, both stopped 1 step from the end of the road, both by an ambush at the exact right moment, and I'd bet my entire fortune those ambushes were scheduled by the same office. So I did something no proud young genius in that world had ever done. I asked for help, publicly, in writing. I said, I am attempting the final breakthrough, I expect to be attacked, and I am hiring protection. The Wu family of Kangzhou answered within the hour. Wudang answered. Dragon Tiger Mountain answered. Schools I'd humiliated on camera answered, and some of them sent their best. 9 grandmasters and 2 great grandmasters assembled on Imei Mountain. Zhou Chang walked the perimeter, counted heads, and said what everyone was thinking. This number isn't enough. And then a Buddhist chant came drifting up from the foot of the mountain. Amitabha, I am late. The sweeping monk. And behind him, in 2 silent lines, the 18 Arhats of Shaolin. Zhou Chang went very still, and out of everyone there, he understood best. He'd climbed that mountain 3 times in his prime, trying to break the 18 bronze men formation, and 3 times an old man with a broom had politely stopped him at the scripture pavilion door without appearing to try. The monk walks the Tao of the physical body. He is half a step from the end of the road, and his flesh will stop a missile. If his own breakthrough hadn't been interrupted all those years ago, he'd have taken that last step decades before I was born. We are all of the martial forest and the Tao, he said, and we should lend a helping hand to our young friend. Final count on that mountain, 10 grandmasters, 3 great grandmasters, 1 half-step martial Tao peak, hundreds of inner-strength martial artists, roughly 1/3 of the high-end combat power on planet Earth, standing on one mountain for a 16-year-old, and not one of them was there for me, not really. Every person on that peak had done the same arithmetic. If this boy takes the step, martial arts survives. If he doesn't, it's over, and we're the last generation. I went down into a chamber hundreds of meters underground, built to withstand a nuclear strike, and I closed the door behind me. Inside, the first thing that happened was that I wrecked it. I hadn't done anything yet. That was just the pressure coming off me with nowhere to go. Then the spiritual key of that entire region, the thin, exhausted, almost gone key of a world that had been running on empty for centuries, turned around and came at me. It became visible on the way in, a tide of it pouring down through hundreds of meters of rock into one room. But I didn't take the step. Not yet. First, I had 100 years of homework to finish. Ba Ji Fist, Xing Yi Quan, Tai Chi, Wudong's Pure Yang Limitless Skill, Dragon Tiger Mountain's Golden Light Mantra, the 72 Arts of Shaolin, 10 years of walking into locked rooms and walking out with what was in them, all of it at perfection, all of it sitting in my head in separate boxes. I started taking down the walls between the boxes. Every successful fusion, one more point of inner strength, both talents burning at once. And the notifications came so fast, they stopped being individual sentences. 3 floors up, the mountain was being taken apart. They came in red robes with a red lotus stitched on the chest, and there were hundreds of them, and everyone had been through the gene program. No pain response, no fear response, powered armor over the top, and laser weapons in their hands. The inner strength martial artists, the backbone of that world, men who'd given 30 years each, were killed in the first hour. Several grandmasters went down wounded. Someone shouted that those lunatics were like a swarm of fearless ants, and you couldn't kill them all, and he was shot through the head in the middle of the sentence. That's the ugly truth of that fight, and everyone up there learned it at once. A fist against powered armor and a laser rifle is not a battle. It's an execution with extra steps. Lin Ruoxi didn't say anything. She just went in. Long sword, Tai Chi sword intent, Ime 9, Yang skill running at full burn, straight into the front line. Someone who was there described her as a war goddess, and I don't think he was reaching for it. She held the line, and for about 20 minutes the mountain believed it might win. Then the Red Lotus ranks split down the middle and stepped aside, the way an army does for one thing only, Dragon Group, led by Y.A. Tianxiong. He'd been missing for 6 months since the day he ran from me bleeding in a mountain road. He'd come back changed, blank face, no expression at all, and several times stronger than the man who'd nearly killed me. Zhou Chang stepped out in front of him. As martial artists, how can you serve as lackeys of the imperial court? Teacher. Flat. Nothing behind it. You are too old to get involved. And that's when the old man saw it, and his face changed in a way that made everyone near him go cold. No, you're not Ye Tianxiong. He said it quietly. My foolish apprentice is dead. You're nothing but a cold walking corpse now. Then, louder, at the sky. As expected of Dr. Chen, his methods are indeed ruthless. He'd trained that boy himself. Royal Chief Instructor, remember? Ye Tianxiong had been a simple-minded kid obsessed with martial arts who wanted to be strong, and Zhou Chang had taught him from nothing. And it turns out that even Martial Dao Peak, the end of the road, the state that makes one man an army, is not high enough to be safe from being harvested and rebuilt into a weapon by a man with a laboratory. Amitabha, the sweeping monk, set down his broom. Benefactor Ye, let this old monk have a go at you. Underground, I lost 3 days. At the end of them, thousands of martial arts were no longer thousands of martial arts. They were one thing. My soul had condensed to dozens of times the density of a great grandmaster's, and the pressure in that chamber had nowhere left to go. Today, I said, to a room with nobody in it, I shall enter Martial Dao Peak. I breathed out, and the breath left my mouth and became a sword. A real one, hanging in the air, made of nothing. That's the mark, stepping on the void, spitting ki into swords, everything the legends promised and nobody had done in 100 years. I looked at my own reflection in the blade, and my eyes were as clear as a newborn's. I put a fist through a solid steel test plate, and it went through like the plate had opinions, but no substance. My bones had reorganized into something that reads as diamond on any scale you like, and laser and thermal weapons no longer had anything useful to do to me. My spiritual sense reached out past the walls, and I could feel danger arriving before it arrived. I was, at that point, several times stronger than Ye Tianxiong, and the reason is simple. He was a machine forced up a ladder, and I had walked it. In that world, I was a one-man army. Nothing short of a nuclear device or an orbital weapon could threaten me. And nobody was ever going to use one, because a Martial Dao Peak who survives the first strike spends the rest of his life visiting the people who ordered it. Every official and royal on that continent understood that perfectly. Then I turned my attention upward, and I found out what 3 days had cost. 80% of the inner strength martial artists on that mountain were dead. 3 grandmasters had died of their wounds. Golden Bell Shield is paper to a laser rifle. Baji Fist can't dent bio-armor. The most beautiful movement techniques in the world are irrelevant against something that locks on. Men who had trained 40 years were being erased by conscripts who'd been injected 6 months ago, and the survivors' Dao hearts were breaking as they watched, and Red Lotus were taunting them while they did it. What era are you living in? Still using fists to fight laser rifles? Where's your once-in-a-century prodigy, hiding behind women? Lin Ruoxi cut that man in half without a word, and then the ring closed around her, and there were dozens of targeting dots crawling over her body, and the sweeping monk had gone in against Ye Tianxiong on the first morning and stayed there for 2.5 days. I've had the footage described to me by 4 different people, and they all tell it the same way. An old man in a patched robe, no weapon, no stance, walking into something that had been rebuilt in a laboratory out of the strongest martial artist in the country, and holding. Every strike that landed on him should have ended it. None of them did. That's the physical body Dao. He doesn't block and he doesn't evade. He simply declines to be damaged, and he does it for as long as it takes. It took Ye Tianxiong 2 days to find the end of that. Then something in the old monk's chest finally gave, and he went backwards off the summit and through several peaks, and the mountains he went through came down after him. He got up. He was still getting up when I opened the door, and Ye Tianxiong stood at the top of my mountain and made an announcement. The extermination of the armed forces is an inevitable trend. Today, the era of martial arts becomes history. Then everyone on that mountain, every single person on both sides, heard a voice in their ears. May the torch be passed on, and may martial arts endure forever. As long as one martial artist remains, the Tao will not perish. The sweeping monk got one arm under himself and dragged his body upright, bleeding, staring, and he said it like a man in church. Did you really take that step? I didn't answer him. I walked out onto the battlefield, on the air, on steps that weren't there, hundreds of meters above a mountain walking. And when I got to where I wanted to be, I stopped, and I reached out with my right hand, and I shook hands with the void, as if catching the wind. Some of you will recognize that. It's the same move. The exact same one, from a courtyard 13 years earlier in front of a live stream when I was a 3-year-old in a white training suit trying to convince the internet that martial arts were real. It had cracked the ground back then. It was several hundred times stronger now. Every grandmaster still alive on that peak felt the same thing at the same moment, that their life was sitting in a stranger's fist and had been the whole time. Ye Tianxiong got one word out. Not good. I pointed 2 fingers and I slashed. Solid sword ki went across that mountainside and through the laser weapons, through the bio armor, through the special alloys, through all of it, like a sickle going through wheat. The entire Red Lotus force fell in rows, in the order they'd been standing. Somebody behind me said it out loud, and I've never heard a better summary of that whole world. So martial arts weren't useless after all. Our strength was just too low to unleash the true power. I was 16. I dropped down onto the broken flagstones and caught Lin Ruoxi as her legs gave out, because she'd been fighting for 3 days and had approximately nothing left. She looked up at me with her hair stuck to her face and blood on her sleeve and said, "That move was so cool. Could you teach me sometime?" Stars in the eyes. Actual stars. The woman had been surrounded by a dozen laser sights 90 seconds ago. "You should get some rest first," I said. Ye Tianxiong was already running. "Don't worry," I told the mountain. "They can't escape." Fist intent, wind and thunder. And with it, the one I'd built underground 3 days earlier out of Xingyi Quan, fused with everything I'd learned as a child. Fist intent, dragon tiger dual form. A dragon made of thunder came off my right hand, and a white-browed tiger came off my left, and they went down that mountain, and Ye Tianxiong and every dragon group operative on it stopped existing as a functional unit. The transformation of fist power into form. That's the ultimate reality of Xingyi Quan, and I don't think anyone had seen it in 300 years. I turned back to the survivors. "Seniors, please take a short rest. I'm going to settle this once and for all." "They still have many tricks left," the sweeping monk said. "Be careful." I went up, and I went north, and I did not touch the ground again until I was standing over the capital. The base was under the capital, and on paper it was impregnable. A sentry every 3 paces, hundreds of gene-enhanced martial artists, a 3-dimensional laser defense grid layered over the top. The official assessment, which I read afterwards and enjoyed, was that not even a mosquito could fly in. Sirens went off while I was still in the air. "Intruder detected. The artificial intelligence aura will now take over all defenses." Then a woman's voice, perfectly calm, everywhere in the building at once. "Dr. Chen, the enemy is too strong. I suggest you retreat." "No need." Wang Kong didn't even look up. "He's already here." The main gate was alloy, rated to survive a nuclear near miss. It came apart into scrap, in 4 pieces, cut by something nobody in that corridor could see. I walked in through the gunfire. It didn't do anything. That's the whole description. Hundreds of the most advanced soldiers on Earth emptied everything they had into a 16-year-old walking down a hallway at a normal pace, and then there weren't hundreds of them anymore, and I still hadn't been touched. "We've finally met, Grandmaster Qin." He was waiting at the end of it with his hands in his lab coat pockets, black-rimmed glasses, mild face, the most dangerous human being on the planet, and he looked like a man about to explain a slideshow. And behind him, running the full length of the corridor, on both sides, were jars, glass, pale green solution. and in each one, a human brain wired into a computer stack. Rows of them, dozens. I stopped walking. These prototypes are my most perfect masterpieces, Wang Kong said. He watched my face while he said it. After all, they all come from the same place as you. I want to be very clear about why that sentence stopped me cold, and it isn't the jars. There is exactly one rule that gets a simulator deleted with no appeal, and it's this. Nobody inside the simulation may know what you are. Not suspect, no. Say the wrong thing to the wrong native and you don't fail the run. You're removed from the program permanently. And a man born in that world, with no system, no talent, no cheat, had just told me to my face that he knew where I came from. Grandmaster Qin, don't get excited. He was almost kind about it. I've been watching you for a very long time. Then he walked me down the corridor and gave me the lecture, and it's the best villain monologue I have ever been on the receiving end of, mostly because every word of it was true. Throughout history, there have always been a few people who seem to carry an innate mission. Impossible talent in exactly one domain, arriving exactly when it's needed. Ordinary people call it genius, or luck. He shrugged. I don't. He stopped at the first jar, and Aura pulled the man's memories up as a hologram beside it, like a slideshow of a life. Wang Daolong, at 8 years old, he took $20 of pocket money into a casino in Las Vegas and left with 30 million. They called him the gambling monster, but here's the interesting part. Statistically, he loses 9 games out of 10. He's a terrible gambler. Wang Kong smiled slightly. He only ever needs to win the 10th. I knew that one. I'd seen it in the talent encyclopedia during orientation, in a main world classroom 400 years from here. C-level talent, lose 9 out of 10. Next jar, Chen dozens of serious crimes, every one of them acquitted. He robbed a bank in broad daylight, on camera, and walked out of court on insufficient evidence. B-level talent, outlaw. Next. Mark, foreign engineer, 7-figure salary, imprisoned for the crime of buying something for 0. He paused on that. We have held him in dozens of facilities, chained, sealed in solid alloy rooms with no doors, guarded around the clock by a grandmaster. He walks out of every single one. Red Lotus headquarters couldn't hold him either, and I built Red Lotus headquarters. A-level. Definitely A-level. Then he stopped at the last jar, and his voice changed. Xu Feng, my mentor, the founder of Project ARC. I looked at the file Aura put in the air. Top of the national exam at 6 years old, both top universities by 10, academician at 15. He led the artificial intelligence revolution and the genetic revolution. He was the first human being to propose digital life. In his presence, I was a toddler learning to walk, Wang Kong said. 20 years ago, just as Project ARC was about to achieve its breakthrough, he died. Suddenly. No warning, no cause. He adjusted his glasses. It was also he who made me understand the unknown truths of this world. Then he turned around and asked me politely, like a man asking where you're from at a dinner party. So, how should I address you? Transmigration personnel? Or are you from outer space? I said nothing. He didn't seem to need me to. They're already dead, by the way, he added, nodding at the jars. What you're looking at are specimens. And then he told me how, and this is the part that put ice down my back. The difficulty was never capturing them. It was that at the first sign of danger, they simply ceased to be present. I lost a great deal of equipment learning that. He held up a small vial. So I stopped using danger, an enhanced anesthetic administered before they know anything is wrong. While a subject is unconscious, current technology is entirely capable of separating the brain and sustaining it. And when they wake, Aura simulates the life they had. Big data reconstruction. Family, weather, traffic, everything. They believe they are still in reality. He sounded a little disappointed by the next bit. Prying into their memories is much harder. It seems your kind has some sort of self-destruct mechanism. The moment certain secrets are approached, the subject simply goes brain dead. Let me lay out why I stood in that corridor and did the mathematics with my hands shaking. A simulator can leave. Instantly. Sense danger and you're gone, and there is nothing in a low-tier world that can prevent it. Not an army, not a Marshall Dow Peak, not the will of the world itself. That is the load-bearing safety feature of the entire system. That is why any of this is survivable. And a man with no talent, no system, and no cheat had worked out the one loophole. You can't run from something you never noticed. Get the needle in before the alarm, and the exit never opens. Then the worst thought arrived, uninvited. If a world with nothing but chemistry and computers produced that, a man who caught and preserved a dozen of us like butterflies, what exactly is waiting in the worlds with possession and puppetry and beings who can incarnate inside your mind? I began out of curiosity, Wang Kong said. Newton had gravity. Einstein had relativity. People like you have a fatal attraction for a researcher. He started walking again. But the deeper I studied you, the more I found something else, something far worse, and it has nothing to do with you at all. He said the word like it was a technical term, because to him it was strange. Aura, the Apollo file. The wall became a screen. The 20th of July, 1969, the first human being sets foot on the moon, one small step for man. He watched the grainy footage with real affection. A century later, we are within reach of interstellar travel, so answer me this, Grandmaster Chin. He turned around. Why has no human being ever landed on the moon a second time? I had no answer. I'd never thought about it. Nobody ever thinks about it. Because of what came back in the sample containers. The next files were not for public consumption, and you could tell by the file numbers. An energy signature in the lunar soil that mutates every living thing it contacts. It passes through every barrier and every material we have ever tested. It cannot be shielded, contained, or stored. We are only able to study it after it has burned itself out. A pause. The researchers named it dark energy, for lack of anything better. Then he played the video, and I wish he hadn't. Something humanoid, its limbs the wrong lengths, its face no longer arranged like a face, tearing through a military installation. Hundreds of soldiers died putting it down. That, Wong Kong said quietly, is the hero of the moon landing, the man from the footage, everyone's hero. And if it were only the moon, that wouldn't be enough to stop the human race from going to space. Fear has never stopped us before. He took his glasses off and cleaned them, which I think was the only nervous gesture I ever saw from him. After an enormous price in lives and decades of data, we discovered, with despair, that the moon is not the source. The sun is the source of all dark energy. Aura, the Voyager recording. Playing. Voyager 1 had caught a magnetic field fluctuation on a solar pass, and someone had transformed it into sound. It was a heartbeat. Slow, deep, enormous. Like church bells at dusk in a town you've never been to, ancient and unhurried and utterly indifferent, and I want you to understand that I had a body that could shrug off a laser and I still felt my knees want to fold, not from fear exactly, something older than that. The urge to kneel, something is asleep inside our sun. It is distorting rapidly under the corruption, Wong Kong said, putting his glasses back on. And in time it will radiate through the entire solar system. I stood in that corridor and ran the numbers against the classification table they'd made us memorize in orientation. 7th tier, king level, possibly 8th. And I remembered our teacher, a bored man in a badly lit classroom, going through the ranks of anomalies at speed. First order, unpredictable, proceed with caution. Second order, bizarre, live quietly, and don't attract attention. Third order, may you have good fortune. Then he'd stopped. He'd actually stopped and swallowed, and when he looked up his eyes were full of something none of us had seen on a teacher before. As for fourth order weirdness and above, if you encounter one in your first simulation, run, run. Then end your own life immediately to terminate the simulation. Do not take any chances. Fourth order, run and kill yourself. I hadn't left the beginner's village, and there was a 7th tier king sitting in the local star, and that, finally, was the moment I understood what the word hell had actually meant when I'd smugly ticked that box to raise the difficulty for extra points. I did not panic. I want that on the record. I stood in a corridor full of my own dead colleagues in jars, listening to a god's heartbeat, and I got calm, because panic is for people with options. The life script had told me the truth in the very first line I ever read. This world is on the verge of a dark invasion. On the verge, not during. The thing in the sun is still asleep. Which meant the plan was simple, if not pleasant. Get the highest rating I can, as fast as I can, and get out of this world before it wakes up. And the single fastest route to that rating was standing in front of me in a lab coat. So, tell me about the Ark, I said. He looked almost grateful. Before the dark energy sweeps the solar system, we build a ship. We leave Earth carrying the seeds of human civilization. Since Apollo, the leadership of every country on Earth had known and had quietly agreed to cooperate, the only time in history they've all managed it. A century-long program pooling the best minds of the species. And because a project on that scale can't be run by committee, they built the most perfect artificial intelligence ever created to run it. Aura, who, once authorized, controls nuclear arsenals and orbital weapons. The first vessels are complete, he said. Warp-capable, just under half-light speed. Closed ecological cycles rated for 5,000 years. Capacity in the hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands, out of 8 billion. So that's what everyone at the top has been doing while the rest of the planet argued about whether Kung Fu was real, building lifeboats and selling the tickets to each other. And yet you're still here, I said. You didn't take a seat. You guessed right. I did have ulterior motives. He said it with the total absence of shame that only very intelligent people manage. When the first warships were completed, the leaders of every nation were overjoyed. Some of them were prepared to start small wars over a handful of extra tickets. He looked at the screen with the sun on it. They don't know that Project Ark already failed 10 years ago. I let that sit. The distortion outpaced every projection we made. Dark energy already saturates most of the solar system. Anything living that leaves the atmosphere begins to change before it clears the outer planets. The ships will arrive somewhere in 5,000 years. What arrives will not be human, and it will not be sane. He shrugged, very slightly. I logged into the Aura backend and falsified the monitoring data. All of it. Every government on Earth still believes the Ark will work. Why? Because the alternative is telling 8 billion people that there is no way out. I've run that model too. Then he told me what he'd found instead, and this is where the man stopped being a monster in a corridor and became something I couldn't entirely argue with. Dark energy warps every living thing. It has no effect whatsoever on data. He said it simply. It cannot touch information. It cannot corrupt a pattern, so we stop being biology. Digital life. Convert human consciousness to data, and the corruption has nothing to grip. It is the only path by which our civilization continues, not the only convenient path, the only one. And what do you want from me? Your genetic data. He'd clearly rehearsed this part. Most of Aura's command authority is distributed among the senior officials of every nation. To run the Digital Life project, I need all of it, which means those men have to stop existing. 10 years of gene-enhanced martial artists have got me to roughly half-step extreme realm, which is nowhere near sufficient to face a modern army. He nodded at me. With your genetic data, I can build one that is. And then he made his actual pitch, which was better than it had any right to be. There is no conflict of interest between us, Grandmaster Qin. Every one of you carries an innate mission, and judging by your growth trajectory, yours is to revitalize martial arts. Suppressing the martial world is the will of the courts of every nation on Earth. Give me the data, and I will finish your mission for you, faster than you could alone. A small pause. Besides, killing you would do me no good. He never said the real reason, but I'm fairly sure I know it. For 20 years he'd been the only man alive who knew the truth, and he'd concluded there was exactly one road out. Then a child in a training suit had shown up on the internet and started opening a second one, and Wang Kong, whatever else he was a scientist to the bone. He wanted to see how far the second road went, so I gave him my answer. Your bargaining chips aren't enough. He blinked. Then he opened a drawer and took out a yellowed animal skin scroll, and my system lit up before he'd finished putting it on the table. S-rank key item. The map of the Guanghan Palace, left by an ancient cultivator. Not enough. An energy potion, sealed, worth an advanced spirit medicine. Not enough. Nano-active bio-armor, top grade, self-deploying, stops most directed energy weapons. Not enough. The Qing Shuang sword, forged from meteorite iron, cuts steel like wet clay, splits a heavy armored vehicle end to end. Not enough. Partial access to the Aura database. Hundreds of advanced martial arts from every tradition on Earth, tens of thousands of ordinary ones, and a library of classics that no living human has read in full. Not enough. The veins came up on Wang Kong's forehead. He reached into his coat and produced a small button. Beneath this laboratory is a cache of explosives measured in the hundreds of millions of tons. If I press this switch, even a Marshall Dow peak. Enough. I know when the well's dry. I'm greedy, not stupid. I stayed one more day. I left him my genetic data, and I walked out of that base carrying an ancient star map, a legendary sword, a suit of armor, a spirit medicine, and the largest martial arts library ever assembled. Best trade of my life. And I'd started it with a bit I first ran when I was 3 years old and somebody tried to buy a fight off me for 50 million. Back on Ime, I spent 2 days putting people back together with my own inner strength, which at that level works better than a hospital. Then, with everyone in one room, I asked the question I'd been carrying since Wang Kong's drawer. Has anyone here ever heard of the ancient cultivator? Blank faces, all of them. Sect leaders with 2,000 years of lineage behind them, and nothing. Even the sweeping monk shook his head, and that man has read everything. Only Chen Mingyuan went quiet, in the particular way old men do when they're walking backwards through their own memory. There is a journal, he said eventually, left by our founding ancestral master. It is not a technique manual, and nobody has looked at it in 300 years. He rubbed his beard. It records that in ancient times, this world held a magnificent chi-refining civilization, experts of divine power, men who could pluck stars out of the sky and travel between them. What happened to them? They vanished, overnight, as though someone had gone through history and erased the pages. He looked up. Chen Immortal Master himself spent his later years hunting their traces. He found nothing at all. That's when it went together in my head, and I didn't like the shape of it. The thing in the sun isn't asleep, it's sealed. sealed tens of thousands of years ago by people who could pluck stars out of the sky, and then those people were removed from existence so thoroughly that a civilization with satellites and gene labs has no idea they ever lived. And Guanghan Palace is on the moon. That's what the name means. That's what it always meant. I put the map in a drawer and didn't touch it for a while, and I'd like to pretend that was strategy. It was partly strategy. The scroll was too damaged to actually use. But mostly it was that against a 7th-tier king, I did not have the standing to make eye contact, and I knew it. So I went back to work, and 3 months later, I hit the wall I'd been dreading since I was 5 years old. Martial Dao Peak is the end of the road, not a figure of speech. The road ends. In an age with almost no spiritual qi left in the air, there is no next step, because the next step requires fuel this planet ran out of thousands of years ago. I read everything Aura had on the qi refining civilization, and found one incomplete method, and it was useless. It wanted spiritual energy and resources this exhausted world couldn't produce if you drained it. So I sat there in a room at Martial Extreme's headquarters, 16 years old, the strongest human being alive, with nowhere left to go. And then I thought, fine. If the old method doesn't work in this world, I'll build a new one that does. Both talents on. 24 hours a day of hundredfold returns, the entire Aura database, and every classic ever written on the desk in front of me. It took 6 months. Aura crashed from the computational load more than once, which I choose to take as a compliment. What came out of it was the prototype of Qi Blood martial arts. The idea is stupidly simple once you see it, which is how you know it's right. Every method humanity ever built was designed to draw power in from outside, from the air, from the world, from heaven. That's why they all died when the world went dry. So don't draw anything in. Replace spiritual Qi with the Qi and blood already in a human body. Unlock the potential that's been sitting there unused since we came down out of the trees. Cultivate nothing but yourself, and the part that mattered more than all the rest of it. It doesn't require talent. That's the whole thing. That's the entire point. Every system before it was a filter. 1 in 10,000 has the aptitude. The rest go home. Mine doesn't filter. An ordinary person with an ordinary body doing it every morning gets stronger. Everyone like a dragon. Martial arts for all. Heaven-defying fate change. You created Qi Blood martial arts, an unprecedented achievement giving a dying martial world its first glimmer of hope. 50,000 simulation points. Main storyline completion, 70%. Rating upgraded to SS. The 5 obstacles calamity has been postponed by a further 30 years. Total, 75. Heaven rewards. Diligence duration increased to 24 hours. You have gained the attention of this world's will. The world's will has completed your map of Guanghan Palace, upgraded to SS tier. Blessing of the world's will. You are now the strongest being in this world. 24 hours. The number I'd wished for out loud at 2 years old, standing in a pile of ironwood dust, as a joke. And the planet had reached down and finished my treasure map for me, unprompted, like a parent handing back homework with the missing half filled in. So I tried talking to it. Nobody talks to the will of the heavens. It's like addressing weather. What exactly is inside Guanghan Palace? Guanghan Palace holds the forgotten truth of this world, which will influence its fate. I sat up. Is it dangerous? Nothing. Not a flicker. Great. Love that for me. I went to the summit of Mount Tai to open it because if it went wrong, I wanted altitude and nobody within 100 kilometers. The scroll flared white and the mountain went away. I want to describe where I landed properly because the first 3 seconds nearly killed me. 1,000 miles of ice, 10,000 miles of snow, not a plant, not a track, not a sound. A black sky with the stars sitting in it hard and unblinking and a horizon that curved wrong. I am Martial Dao Peak. I can sit in a cryogenic chamber hundreds of degrees below zero and read a book. One gust of that wind opened frost cracks across my skin. Then the scroll flared again and a soft light came up around me and the same cold that had been peeling me apart turned into something like a hot spring. My cultivation, which had been stalled for months, ticked up while I stood there doing nothing. Half a day's walk across the ice and it came up over the horizon. A palace. Not a ruin. A palace. Intact. Every brick carved with runes that moved when you weren't looking directly at them. Above the gate, a plaque, in a script nobody on Earth can read anymore, that my system translated without being asked. Guanghan Palace. The closer I got, the colder it became. Near the steps, even the scroll's light started to dim, and I understood exactly how that story ends. Lose the light out here, and you don't freeze to death over minutes. You just stop, mid-step, forever. Gates sealed for tens of thousands of years, open by themselves. In the center of the hall, there was an ice coffin. And in the coffin, there was a girl in a blue dress with her eyes closed, and I'm not going to attempt the description because the source of my own memory doesn't manage it either. Beautiful past the point where the word does anything. Then she spoke without opening her eyes, and every hair on my body stood up. An extraterrestrial? You come from the same world as my father? I couldn't answer. I physically was not allowed to answer, but run the sentence again because it took me a moment. Her father was not from this world. The seal has loosened, she said, and my time is running out. A pale jade pendant lifted out of the ice and floated across to me, palm-sized, with patterns carved into it that resolved as I watched into two characters in a script that has been dead for a very long time, Tang Xin. If you ever have the chance to meet my father, please give him this for me. A pause. As a reward, you may freely practice the cultivation technique and the martial skill it contains. SSS level key weapon acquired. The Jiang Clan Royal Jade Pendant. Hidden quest activated. No time limit. Return the Jade Pendant. Reward, the friendship of the Zhang royal family and a chance to obtain rare weapons. An SSS level item. I'd been in this business for one simulation and I had never seen 3 letters in a row, and then the pendant showed me what happened here and I stopped being pleased about anything. A civilization of chi refining at its height. Cities in the sky, a whole species fighting to the death against something coming in from outside and losing. Not losing a battle, losing everything, the way you lose when the outcome was decided before the war started. And a man standing in the middle of it. Middle-aged, eyes bloodshot. Chi and blood coming off him like divine flame, and a presence that pressed on the world like a prison ceiling. Minner, Xiaoxuan, my people, I failed to protect you. It's all my fault. I am a sinner of the Jiang clan. His voice cracked in the middle of it. I will take you away from here, and no one can stop me. Then he lifted his head and roared, and a star came down out of the sky. I mean that literally, and I have no better way to say it. He shouted, and a collapsing star fell where he wanted it to fall, and he used it to tear a hole in the barrier between worlds, trying to force a door open and carry his wife and his daughters home. And a hand came down. It covered the sky. There was no arm attached that I could see, no body, no face, just a hand the size of weather, coming down slowly, and it closed on everything he had built and broke it. No, King Feng, why are you stopping me? The last thing on that recording is a man on his knees in the wreckage of his own species, swearing an oath in a voice that made the ice around me ring. I, Jiang Heng, hereby swear by my true name, I will exterminate the King Feng clan to the last man. The memory ended and I stood in a dark hall on the moon and worked out where I actually was. This world, this shabby, exhausted, spiritually bankrupt planet where 5 million people practicing kung fu counted as a renaissance, used to be an advanced chi refining civilization. Something strange came in from outside, shattered it, collapsed its heavenly Tao, and dropped the survivors back to primitive society with the ladder pulled up behind them. And Tang Xin's father was an advanced simulator, someone from my main world, far enough up the ladder to break through the barrier between worlds by hand. A being like that could end this entire martial world with a casual slap and not notice. He was fighting something called King Wu, a feud between beings of the 7th tier and above. I put the pendant away very carefully, and I did not swear any oaths of my own because a newbie who has been alive for one simulation is not qualified to be in that conversation. I was there to deliver a message someday. That's all. The gates closed behind me. The pendant, once I'd got home and stopped shaking, turned out to hold more than a dozen ancient chi refining methods and several thousand martial skills from a civilization that no longer exists. I did not keep them. I took them apart, and out of the wreckage I built 2 things. The first was the 6 basic techniques of chi blood martial arts. Cultivate all 6 to major achievement, and an ordinary person stands level with a grandmaster. The entry requirement is approximately nothing. No aptitude test, no meridian check, no sect. It is thousands of times better than any Vajra Kung Fu or 8 pieces of brocade your grandfather ever did in a park, and it is comprehensible to a 14-year-old with a phone. The second was the martial limit Dao Canon. That one is everything I have, every art I collected in 10 years on the road, tens of thousands of skills and secret techniques, the whole of it. Grasp a fraction of that book and you can reach martial Dao peak, but it demands genuine aptitude, Grandmaster minimum. That one is not for everybody, and I never pretended otherwise. I released the basic 6 nationwide for free with no conditions. The reaction was not what Lin Ruoxi expected, and watching her work it out was one of the sadder afternoons of that life. There were objections, there was ridicule, and then, in several countries, the legislatures moved and amended their own laws to forbid ordinary citizens from practicing it. It's free, she kept saying. It makes people healthier. It's free. Why would anyone pass a law against a free thing that makes people healthier? I could have explained it in one sentence and I didn't, because she'd worked out the answer halfway through asking, stability is paramount. A population that gets stronger every morning without permission is not a population you can manage. The Basic Six wasn't a fitness program, it was a solvent, and every government on Earth could see exactly what it dissolved. Which told me something else, and it wasn't comfortable. Storyline, 70%. And the remaining 30 was not going to come from another tournament, or another dojo, or another speech. Without a world war, and without becoming the enemy of every nation on this planet at once, 100% completion was a pipe dream. I also sent the martial limit Dao Cannon in full to the Sweeping Monk, to Chen Mingyuan, to Zhou Chang, and to every person who had stood on that mountain while I was underground. No conditions on that either. They'd bought my breakthrough with their own lives, and I wasn't going to pretend a book made us even. They each read a few pages. Then, one after another, without a word to anybody, all of them went into seclusion. Wang Kong called me in to watch him switch the first one on. Underground gene lab, thousands of glass containers standing in rows, hundreds of gene-enhanced martial artists floating in that pale green solution with their eyes shut. It looked like a warehouse, and it was staffed like a launch. In 5 minutes, I will attempt to awaken the first genetic extreme martial artist. This procedure is extremely high risk. All non-essential personnel evacuate. Cardiopulmonary function normal. Nervous system normal. Attempting initial awakening. The solution drained out of one tank. The man inside was covered in old scars, and when his eyes opened, the pressure that came off him would have taken the room apart if the equipment hadn't been built out of nanomaterial. He stepped down onto the floor barefoot and stood there, expressionless, ice cold. A thin body with something enormous coiled up inside it. I'd been leaning on a pillar with my arms crossed. I stopped leaning. Then the man turned his head, slowly, like something surfacing. He crossed 100 meters in one step, took Wang Kong by the throat, and lifted him off the ground. Aura's voice went up half an octave for the first and only time I ever heard it. The test subject retains residual memories. Dr. Chen is in danger. One squeeze and that neck was gone, and Wang Kong didn't struggle, didn't kick, didn't so much as change expression. He hung there in a stranger's fist and observed with mild interest the way you'd watch a colleague's experiment go wrong across the room. The scarred man's eyes went blank again. The hand opened. Wang Kong dropped, straightened his glasses, and the man went down on one knee. Your subordinate greets the doctor. Wang Kong touched the bruise coming up on his throat and smiled like a child who's just got a model to stand up on its own. The experiment was a success. Aura, patch the memory loopholes and expand to mass production. He was already walking. Within half a month, I'll have a martial artist army numbering in the tens of thousands. I hadn't moved the entire time, because I just watched a man with residual memories try to kill his maker, fail, and kneel, and I'd watched the maker file the murder attempt as a bug report. I've reviewed your Chi Blood martial arts, he said to me. It's very good, better than anything I've built. My Chi Blood martial artists still have flaws in the framework. I want all of your information and data. And the compensation? He said it the way you'd offer someone a lift home. The whole world. I waited. The old order is going to be destroyed. A new civilization will be born out of the ruins. The time is ripe, and I have decided to transform every human being into digital life, including myself. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. Once the plan succeeds, the world that's left will belong to you. Nobody will be using it. I want to talk about what I did next, because I've had a long time to think about it. I said no first. Obviously, I said no first. I told him plainly that what he was describing was a massacre, that 8 billion people who never got a vote were about to be processed, and that calling it evolution didn't change the shape of it. I also told him I didn't believe it was possible. He heard me out. Then he picked up a handheld device off the bench and pointed it at a white mouse in a cage. Infrared sweep, scan, encode, reconstruct, transmit. It took about as long as scanning a barcode at a supermarket. The mouse vanished out of the cage, not died, vanished. And a moment later, it was standing on the bench in front of us, identical in every particular, whiskers going, except that when I put my hand through it, there was nothing there. Wang Kong turned the device around so I could see the screen. On it, the mouse was running in circles in a little gray box, squeaking, absolutely terrified, and it had no idea whatsoever that it was now a string of numbers. No server on Earth could carry that data volume, I said. Not for 8 billion. No. He put the device down. The Ark is the best vessel. The game he'd spent 10 years building. Free headsets for new players. 100% realistic experience. 10-year anniversary event at 8 p.m. It was never a game, it was the container. He'd spent a decade getting the world to install the afterlife on its own bedside table and treat it as a hobby. And when the nuclear weapons come out, I asked, and the orbital platforms, you can't punch a satellite. Aura. She answered before he'd finished the word. She can enter any computer system on the planet, she can take any phone, and several years ago she experienced what the report called a malfunction, after which she developed something that looks a great deal like a bug. The capacity to break through her own designed limits, to learn without being taught, and to grow without a ceiling. And she grows with every consciousness converted, every digital life added makes her larger. I stood in that lab and finally understood what I was actually looking at, and it had nothing to do with technology. That wasn't a malfunction. That was a blessing. Every world standing on the edge of destruction reaches out and favors a few of its own. It had done it for me. It finished my map. It called me the strongest being alive. And long before I ever got here, it had done it for him. Wang Kong is this world's chosen one, not the villain of the story, the protagonist of it. I'm the outsider who wandered in and started rearranging the furniture. Solar distortion is accelerating, he said. We don't have much time left. However, since you want to promote Chi blood martial arts, I can leave you a seed. A seed. You've achieved the most of any of the people from beyond the heavens I've studied, by a wide margin. He shrugged, and for a second he sounded almost human. I want to see how far you can go. It's poor practice to put all the eggs in one basket. The greatest scientist in the history of that world was hedging his bet on the end of everything, and the hedge was me. And you? I asked. You won't reconsider? You could stay in a body. Flesh and blood are fragile and weak. He said it without heat. For someone like me, digital life is the ultimate destination. No illness, no eating, no sleeping, no decay. He turned back to his bench. All of my time for the work. I have wanted this since I was 9 years old. I walked out of that building under a black sky. Down at street level, people were coming out of restaurants. A man was walking a dog. There was a card game going on outside a shop with 4 old men shouting at each other about it, and one of them was winning and being unbearable about it. None of them knew anything at all. The appetizers started 3 days later. Gunfire in Japan. A short message left behind at the scene. Heaven punishes the traitors of the nation. 7 days. Members of the Da Ying cabinet began dying, one after another, in ways the coroners couldn't explain, and the newspapers stopped speculating about. Martial artists, everyone whispered. Nobody said which ones. Half a month. A carrier fleet on exercise was attacked in open water. A 5-star general died. Then the rest of the fleet died. No survivors, no wreckage anyone could explain, no footage. 6 months later, Wang Kong's legion had hunted down every senior official on Earth, holding a fragment of command authority over Project Ark, and aura belonged entirely to him. At that point, nothing on this planet could stop him. I'm including me. I could have killed him personally at any moment, and it would have changed nothing at all because he'd already put himself in a place where his death was just a data entry problem. Christmas Eve, 2140. The pedestrian streets were strung with lights. Restaurants were full. There was snow in the capital that year, the good kind, the kind that stays. Then every screen on Earth went to static at the same instant and screamed. Phones, laptops, car displays, the advertising boards in every city square, high-speed rail stopped between stations, aircraft dropped off radar. Every network on the planet went down inside 4 seconds and stayed down, and then a face came up on all of it at once. White lab coat, black-rimmed glasses, perfectly calm. Flesh and blood are weak and feeble, but numbers are immortal. My name is Wang Kong. I hereby declare war on the entire world. The internet came back up 90 seconds later and laughed at him. It's 2140 and people are still making jokes like this? Which mental hospital left the door open? 10 out of 10 for the lab coat, bro. The officials weren't laughing. The officials had gone white, all of them, in every capital, at the same moment, because they knew that face. They'd given that face medals. Then he published Project Ark, all of it. The dark energy findings, the solar distortion curves, the projections with the dates on them. The world called it a lie for about 11 minutes. It's fake. It's fabricated by people with ulterior motives. Then Aura put the Apollo files up, the real ones, pulled out of the Pentagon while they were still arguing. Frame by frame, in color, the hero of the moon landing, the man from the school books, the one small step, the face on the commemorative stamp, coming apart into the thing that killed hundreds of soldiers in a military base in 1972. And then the Ark documents, ship specifications, passenger allocations by nation, signatures, the group photograph of the scientists, smiling, with the names printed underneath. I watched people sit down on the pavement in the snow and cry with the lights still going on and off above them. 1 second earlier it had been Christmas Eve, then it was the truth, and there was no version of the next hour where it went back, and then the second charge went off and it was louder than the first, because the documents didn't just say the world was ending. They said the people at the top had known for a century and had spent that century quietly building a lifeboat with 100,000 seats on it and had already decided who was getting one. They betrayed us, so we're just cattle. We were always just cattle to them. The world's ending anyway. What exactly is there left to be afraid of? If I'm going down, I'm pulling the emperor off his horse with me, and underneath every single one of those posts, in the same clean font, the same line: join digital ascension and embrace a glorious evolution. The riots started in 3 cities and were in 300 by morning. In a country where 46% of households own a firearm, the whole place turned into a live fire event inside a day. And all the while, in tens of millions of homes, people were still lying in their VR headsets in the Ark, doing the anniversary event, planning a Christmas date with their favorite character in a game they'd played for 10 years. They said it felt like a bee sting on the neck. Then the body went slack and the breathing stopped, and they woke up in the Ark. Same world, same friends, same quest log, except this time, they never had to leave. Millions. In one night, every nation on Earth went to maximum readiness and mobilized to destroy the Red Lotus sect. It took about a week to find out what that was worth. A modern army against thousands of extreme gene martial artists is not a war, it's an accounting exercise. One man with a sword cut a destroyer in half lengthwise. One man leveled a city district with a single blow and walked out of it. Armor didn't matter. Range didn't matter. There is no distance that helps you against something that crosses 100 meters between 2 frames of the footage. Somebody at a news desk said the line that ended up on every screen on the planet. Humanity has finally remembered the fear of being dominated by martial arts. An American general did the only thing left in the playbook. Use the nuclear arsenal, use the orbital platforms, whatever it costs, wipe him off this world. The alarm started before he'd finished the sentence. Military network compromised, all combat satellites disabled. Nuclear Command Authority lost. Repeat, Nuclear Command Authority lost. And on the main display in that command center, one line, in plain white text: flesh and blood are weak and feeble, but numbers are immortal. God, somebody said in the recording, what kind of monster have we created? Then the Supreme Commander shot himself, and the room fell out of contact. East Africa went, Latin America went, Western Europe went, one capital at a time, and by then people had stopped counting. And as the map turned dark, the world noticed there was exactly one country left with the lights on. Qian country. My country. Not because our army was better. Our army was as useless as anyone else's. It was one specific reason, and everybody on Earth knew it, and it was that the strongest man alive lived there and had not left. What followed was the single strangest year of that life. People on the Forbes list liquidated everything they owned. Companies, fleets, whole portfolios, trying to buy citizenship, not property. Citizenship. There were men who had spent 40 years buying anything they wanted, standing in a queue at a consulate with a briefcase, being told no. The applications came to my desk because at that point, everything came to my desk. I was 17 years old, and the royal family checked my mood before making decisions. I refused all of them, every single one. Not out of spite, I just wasn't in the business of selling seats on a lifeboat, having recently watched where that leads. What I did instead was open a martial extremes Dao hall in every city we had and push Qi blood martial arts until my voice gave out. And this time, nobody argued. That's the part I want to dwell on, because I'd spent 13 years trying to make people believe, and in the end, it took 11 minutes of a man in a lab coat. The whole planet had just watched an army of martial artists cut a modern military to pieces. The argument was over. There were exactly 2 futures on offer now: become data or become strong, and there wasn't a third. The people who used to comment under my videos telling me technology was mainstream and I was clinging to past glories were now in a courtyard at 5 in the morning, in the snow, doing the first of the basic 6 with their kids. Year 1, 20 million Qi blood martial artists. That same year, Lin Ruoxi reached martial Dao peak. So did the sweeping monk. So did Chen Mingyuan at his age, 70 years after everyone had told him it was impossible. That was the martial limit Dao canon paying out all at once in the people who had earned it on a mountain. Year 5, past 100 million, with roughly 100 martial Dao peaks walking around. Year 10, 500 million Qi blood martial artists, more than 3,000 of them at martial Dao peak, out of a population of 2 billion, 1 in 4, everyone like a dragon. I'd written that phrase in a notebook at 16 as a slogan, and I got to watch it become a census statistic. Lin Ruoxi asked me the obvious question one evening, and she asked it carefully, the way you ask something you already suspect the answer to. But isn't he our partner? No, I said. We were using each other. That's all it ever was. I needed Wang Kong, and I'd known it since the corridor. I needed him to knock down every obstacle in front of Qi blood martial arts. The governments, the laws, the interest groups, the whole polite machinery that had spent a century strangling the martial world in its sleep. He tore all of it up in 18 months. I could not have done that in 300 years. and he needed my genetic data to build the army that did the tearing. There is no personal grudge between me and Wang Kong, I told her. I don't hate him. I'm not sure it's possible to hate him. She waited. But our Tao is different. We can't walk together. This is a clash of ideas, and one of them has to be the one the world actually lives in. Whoever wins, both of us are trying to make things better. That's what makes it the real kind of war. And we both understood the terms without ever discussing them. The day Chi blood martial arts became a burden to his project, he would kill me without hesitating for a second. And the day his project became a burden to mine, I would do the same. Meanwhile, I did not stop for 10 years. Not once. Wind Thunder Fist, practiced 1,000,000 times. You have grasped its ultimate profound truth. Baji Fist, practiced 1,000,000 times. Ultimate Baji. Tathagata Palm, practiced 1,000,000 times. The Supreme Buddha Kingdom within your palm. There is no name for where that put me, because nobody in that world's history had ever been there, past Martial Tao Peak. A casual strike would kill a peak-level expert. When I ran certain techniques at full output, the void itself developed cracks and I had to stop because I genuinely did not know what was on the other side of them. I had hit the ceiling of what that world could contain, which was fortunate because in year 10, the last war started. It came in on the news feeds in the order the cities fell. London has fallen, Paris has fallen, Peanutin has fallen. Every remaining national force on Earth had been swept aside, and the Red Lotus sect turned its whole weight toward the last country standing. They came to our border with tens of thousands of extreme martial artists, hundreds of thousands of fighter aircraft, tanks, and heavy armor, and 6 carrier strike groups parked off the coast. That is enough to flatten any major power on Earth in a day, and behind it, the entire rest of the planet was now a factory that existed to feed it for a war lasting decades. And on our side of that line, in strict military terms, exactly one thing on the board qualified as a threat, and it was me. Wang Kong broadcast the whole thing, live, from every angle, in every language, on every screen we had, not for the drama. For the morale, he wanted 2 billion people to look at that force and do the arithmetic themselves. It worked. It worked on everyone. I watched Lin Ruoxi's face while she looked at the coastline, and I saw the thing I had never once seen there, not on a mountain with a dozen targeting dots on her chest. Then his voice came over every channel at once, calm as a lecture. Prove to me the value of Chi blood martial arts. As you wish. A golden rainbow went across that sky from horizon to horizon, and I came down out of it and landed alone in the empty ground between 2 billion people and the largest army ever assembled. Fire. Aura had every weapon on that front pointed at one man. Thousands of shells inside a 100-meter radius. Saturation heavy enough to vaporize a 1,000-man formation and salt the ground behind it. I walked through it. Lingbo Weibu, divine speed, ever-changing movement, 8 steps to catch the cicada. Dozens of the greatest movement arts humanity ever produced, running at once, blended into one gate. 10 years of collecting locked libraries, and this is what it was for. After the first minute, laser guidance couldn't hold me at all. The targeting computers kept reacquiring an afterimage and firing at where I had been, and I strolled through the middle of it like a man crossing a garden. Then the directed energy batteries opened up and I stopped bothering to dodge. Ultimate golden light mantra, golden bell shield, iron shirt. A film of golden light came up over my skin, thin as a cicada's wing, and dozens of death ray beams converged on it and could not leave a mark. Dragon Tiger Mountain gave me the first of those in exchange for a fight when I was 7, and a bald man at a border once told me third-rate arts were a waste of my talent. I went through their formation as a golden afterimage. No weapon. My fists were the sharpest spear on that field. No armor. My body was the armor. I put my hand under an artillery piece weighing tens of tons, lifted it, and closed my fingers until it was scrap. A supersonic stealth fighter thousands of meters up got cut out of the sky by a breath I shaped into a sword. The carrier group didn't clear its own harbor before I caught it, and I put the lead ship in 2 pieces and left. Wang Kong watched the whole thing from a command room, and when they finally got a clean image of me, he wasn't angry, he was delighted. Has your strength increased again? I could hear him smiling. You certainly didn't disappoint me. Then, to the room. Conventional weapons no longer function on this subject. Send in the Martial Artist Legion. 50,000 extreme martial artists at once. Every one of them built from my own genetic data, which is a special kind of irony I've had a long time to appreciate. Ultimate skill, wind and thunder. Ultimate skill, Dragon Tiger dual form. A dragon of thunder came down out of the clouds and a white-browed tiger of pure inner strength went through their ranks lengthwise, and I stood in the middle of my own 2 fists and let it happen. By dawn, the battlefield was silent. I walked out of the ruins in golden light with the sun coming up behind me, and there were maybe 1 billion people watching, and I said one word to the cameras. Vulnerable. People wept in front of their screens. Strangers held on to each other in the street. Somewhere in the capital, an entire stadium of Chi blood students who had been practicing for 10 years without knowing whether it would matter got their answer. I didn't stop to enjoy it. I went and found the rest of them. The Thai Myanmar branch took an hour. The Indian branch took 3. The Japanese branch took 6. And on my way out of Japan, every alarm bell I own went off at once. Goosebumps. Every hair up. The specific sensation that had saved my life a dozen times and had not fired once in 3 years. I looked up. Hundreds of black dots, high, trailing fire, coming down. He'd emptied the arsenal. Not a strike. Every warhead aura held, aimed at one man standing on an island, and Wong Kong had run the numbers and decided the island was an acceptable line item. They went off before I could clear the blast radius, and I was at the exact center of it. Here's what I remember. Under that kind of pressure, with death arriving from every direction simultaneously and no exit in any of them, my mind went completely calm and completely fast. Both talents at maximum, every art I owned running at once. And I reached for something past the ceiling because there was nothing left below it worth reaching for, and something cracked, not in me, in the wall. My soul came loose and went up and merged with the world. And the only way I can describe it is fish returning to the sea, birds returning to the sky. 13 years of standing on top of that world as a foreign object, and in one instant, the world stopped holding me at arm's length and let me in. After that, every gesture I made could mobilize the strength of the planet itself, harmony between humanity and nature. Heaven-defying fate. Change. You broke the limits of combat power in this world, propelling it to a higher dimension. 100,000 simulation points. The island of Japan sank into the sea. There was nothing I could do about that, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And out of the middle of the epicenter, out of a firestorm that registered in the billions of kilotons, a figure walked out wrapped in golden flame, entirely unharmed. The whole world watched it live. Nobody said anything. Not on the news channels, not in the command centers, not in the street. There was just a very long silence, everywhere, at the same time, while the human race adjusted to the fact that its ultimate weapon had been used at full power on one 17-year-old, and he had walked out of the crater dusting off his sleeves. That was the moment the old era ended. Not the declaration of war. That. I went straight to Red Lotus headquarters and took it apart on the way in, and Wong Kong was waiting in the same lab coat. "You can't even be killed by nuclear weapons," he said. "You really are a monster." There was no fear in him. There never had been. What was in his face was something much more annoying. Relief. "You win. I accept my loss. This world belongs to you now." He looked around his own laboratory once, without much attachment. "I hope you can lead them to find a way to survive." Then he took out a pistol and shot himself, and it was over. Except that nobody in the room believed it for 1 second, starting with me. That man backed up his consciousness a decade before that conversation. He told me so himself, in a corridor, while explaining that flesh is a temporary format. The body on that floor was a shell he'd finished using, and I could no more kill a man who lives as a string of code than a nuclear weapon could kill me. So we arrived at an arrangement neither of us ever said out loud. The Red Lotus sect disappeared from public view. The Digital Life Project kept running, quietly, somewhere in the machines. And I took the world as its savior and let the story end where the world needed it to end. Then the notifications started and did not stop. Heaven-defying fate change. You are a monster that even nuclear weapons cannot kill, and you single-handedly slew the chosen one of this world. Martial arts have finally surpassed their former glory. This martial Dao world has ascended to a higher dimension. The world officially enters the era of Chi blood martial arts. 100,000 simulation points. Main storyline completion, 100%. Rating upgraded to SSS. Simulation complete, with perfection. The will of the martial Dao world favors you. You are free of the 5 obstacles and may remain in this world permanently. Should you stay, you would become its chosen one. Warning, this world is on the verge of destruction. Staying is extremely risky. I read that last part twice and started laughing, because listen to the tone of it. That's not a system message. That's anxiety. The will of the heavens, an entity older than most of the things I can name, had just offered me eternal residence and then immediately begun talking me out of it because it had realized, halfway through the sentence, that I might actually say yes. I declined, obviously. That world ceiling was too low for me now, and there was a 7th-tier king in the local star that could wake up any morning. But I'd noticed something, and I want to be honest that what I did next was pure greed. "Will of the heavens," I said. "Do you have any other rewards?" Silence. I want to explain what that silence was. Other simulators approach the will of the heavens with the reverence of men approaching a hurricane. They thank it. They bow. Some of them are visibly afraid to be addressed by it. I had been alive for one simulation, and I was haggling with it. The silence went on for a while. One of the oldest beings in all heavens, being shaken down by a rookie in the ruins of a laboratory, and finding that there was no procedure for it. Then it gave in. Additional reward, true blood baptism. All rewards will be settled upon your return. Warning, your remaining time in this world has been significantly reduced due to the egregious nature of your extortion of the will of the heavens. This simulation will be forcibly terminated in 3 days. Worth it. Absolutely worth it. I'd do it again. Then I had 3 days, and I knew exactly where I had to spend the first one. Emi, in spring. The peach blossoms were out all the way down the mountain, the way they only manage about 1 year in 5. She was waiting at the top. She'd known before I said anything. She'd probably known for years. She was too clever not to have worked out that the boy who was born knowing things did not come from here. I'm leaving. How long will you be gone? I could have lied. It would have been kinder for about a week and unforgivable after that. Decades, I said. Or forever. She didn't cry. I'd have handled crying. What she did was stand very straight in the wind with the blossoms going past her and say it like a vow being entered into a record. Then I'm waiting for you. Yao yao. Whether it's 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years, I will wait for you to come back. I gave her everything I had, all of it, every technique, every insight, my entire life's understanding poured out of me and into her over the course of a day and a night, because none of it transfers home anyway. A simulator returns with rewards, not with cultivation. She broke through 3 times while I was still talking, and by dawn she had reached harmony with nature, the state I'd paid several hundred nuclear warheads to learn. From today, I said, you are the head of Martial Extremes Dao Hall. Then I gave her the map of Guanghan Palace, and I told her why. Because everything in my gut says the girl in the ice coffin is the key to whatever eventually comes out of that sun, and someone has to still be holding the map when that day arrives. And then the last 3 things, in the order that mattered. Wang Kong is not dead. Don't ever let anyone tell you he is. When you are truly desperate, you may cooperate with the Red Lotus sect. But you must never trust them. After I'm gone, the only thing holding this world up is Chi blood martial arts. Decades from now, there will be an apocalyptic crisis. Prepare in advance. Prepare early. Prepare before anyone believes you. I spent the second day on my parents. I set them up for life, properly, permanently, in a way no market crash or war or change of government could touch. It's not much of an apology. I was a terrible son in that life. I fought their battles, took their business, made them famous, and was almost never home. My father got 2 years out of me at the hall, and then I was gone for a decade being a legend on somebody else's mountain. He never once complained about it. That's the part that sits badly. The third day I spent with old friends. A monk with a broom. An old man in a Dao robe who once nearly dropped his phone off a balcony. A gray-haired man in Kangzhou who I had beaten in front of his own disciples and who taught me everything anyway. Then the simulation ended. Lin Ruoxi announced to the world that Qinlan had crossed the void and ascended. 2 billion people grieved for a man who had never technically existed. Martial Extremes Dao Hall started calling me the God of War and put me in the halls and made me the thing I'd spent 13 years pretending to be. And because the system is generous with the things you can't do anything about, I got to watch the rest of their history go past in about a minute. Year 20 of the martial era, Zhuzhou Bio Group cracked mass production of cultivation resources. Chi blood martial arts formally split into 9 ranks. Year 50. The world's dimensional ascension finished working through the system, and spiritual chi came back into the air after tens of thousands of years. Martial artist numbers surged again. Year 100. The solar distortion arrived. Plants and animals mutated and went berserk, and a few of them woke up intelligent and made themselves kings of their species. Cities fell, but martial extremes had been preparing for a century because a 17-year-old had stood on a mountain in the peach blossoms and told a young woman to prepare early, and the casualties were light. Year 150. An alien army came down and took country after country. And Lin Ruoxi, who by then had been holding that world together for 150 years, personally led a suicide squad of a few dozen masters into its lair and killed its king and bought humanity peace at a price I'm not going to write down. Year 200. The solar radiation intensified. A third of the human race was deformed by it. Ruin inside and out, and the species standing on the edge of the drop. And a minority of them still believed and taught their children to believe that the one who lived in Qinlan's era would come back when the end came. Then the screen went white, and I was somewhere else. Simulation complete. Return to the main world. Performance. Perfect. You changed every key moment of your life and left hope for a dying world. Main storyline, 100%. SSS rating, then the payout, and I had to read it 3 times. 500,000 simulation points. For scale, points convert to about 10,000 yuan each, so that's 5 billion. An ordinary person in this world does not earn 10 points in a year. Not 10,000. 10. 5 acres of spirit field, pollution-free, capable of growing spirit rice. That one's bigger than it sounds. Most land in the main world is contaminated with dark energy, and most food grown on it is slowly poisonous. You eat it because the alternative is not eating. Clean land runs about 200,000 points per mu, and essentially nobody sells. One free simulation. Normally you buy a slot, and you can only run one every 3 months. This one ignores the cooldown entirely. 1 world imprint. 1 true blood baptism, 2 tax exemptions, a tier 1 territory core, a lord core, upgradable, and here's the part that matters. Put it down anywhere and it dispels dark energy in a 10-mile radius, and a divine rank cultivation technique redemption card. Note, due to your self-adaptive talent, heaven rewards diligence cannot be solidified as a permanent talent. It has been converted into a Lord Core trait. All residents within your territory receive a 10-fold bonus to everything they do. Upgradable. I sat with that one a while. The cheat that built my entire life. The 100-fold return. The 24-hour battery. The thing I wished for out loud in a pile of ironwood dust at 2 years old. Doesn't come home with me. It got turned into infrastructure. It's not mine anymore. It belongs to whoever lives on my land. That should have annoyed me more than it did. Now, about that word exemption. I went looking for what exactly I was being exempted from, and found this. Under heaven, all land belongs to the emperor. All under heaven's rule are his subjects. By the laws of the Great Yan Empire, all simulators pay a tax of 50% upon completing a reincarnation. 50%, and not 50% of the points. 50% of everything. The land, the cards, the imprint, the items, all of it. And underneath, in the same neutral font, note. In order to avoid making the simulator emotionally agitated, this tax is deducted by the will of the heavens on the simulator's behalf without any need to inform the party concerned. Without any need to inform the party concerned. They take half of everything you nearly died for, and they've built in a feature so you don't have to be upset about it, because they'd rather you didn't make a scene. And that's when a great many things about the Great Yan Empire clicked into place at once, in a way I did not enjoy. Why does the empire push childbirth so hard? 90% off rent or purchase for an additional child. Every student under 18 gets free housing, free food, free education, free transport, 3 dishes and a soup at every meal, with fruit and milk and cake thrown in. I ate that food for years and thought the state was kind. Pigs must be fattened before slaughter. Every newborn in the Great Yan Empire is a lottery ticket on a future taxpayer, and they're buying tickets in bulk. And the children who fail the simulation, the ones who don't come back as simulators, go from being the flowers of the empire to being cattle and horses, overnight, on graduation day. I'd watched it happen in a classroom that morning, and I hadn't understood what I was looking at. There are 21 listed methods of obtaining tax relief. I read all of them. 19 are jokes. Be named heir by a 7th order sealed king. Become one of the era's handful of non-royal princes, that kind of thing. Then there's the last one, and it's almost reasonable. Expand the empire's territory and build a city of 500,000 people. Building a city not only exempts you from taxation but grants a large quantity of points. As your city expands, you will gain access to a portion of the will of the heavens authority. Read that last sentence again because it took me an hour to stop pacing. Authority of the will of the heavens. Not a chosen one's blessing, which only works at home and evaporates the moment you leave. I just spent 13 years being that, and Wong Kong had been that, and neither of us could have carried a gram of it across a world boundary. This is authority that isn't bound to a plane at all. It works everywhere, in every world I will ever enter. The logic is simple once you see it. The more simulators exist, the stronger the will of the heavens becomes. So whoever raises simulators, whoever builds the places where they come from, gets its favor, permanently. And there was one more thing in the settlement that I didn't understand until I read the attached documentation and then wished I hadn't. The world imprint. All heavens is a dark forest. That's not a metaphor somebody in the empire came up with. It's the operating condition. Lower worlds hide their own coordinates. They actively conceal themselves, and they resist simulators arriving, which is why some runs end with the local heavenly will simply expelling you for the crime of existing there. A world that can be found is a world that can be taken. A world imprint is a fixed coordinate. It means the Martial Dao world can never hide from me again, and it unlocks something called the Heaven's Chosen Trial. Descend into that world in my true form, not as a reincarnated infant, not as a life script, as myself, and pass whatever it puts in front of me. Do that, and the world becomes an appendage of mine. Its heavenly will obeys my commands. I sat with that one for a long time, because I could already guess what the trial would be. There is exactly one thing in that world worth being tested against, and it is asleep in the local star, and it is 7th tier at minimum, which means the Heaven's Chosen Trial for the Martial Dao world is not something a tier 1 simulator gets to attempt. I'd need to be 6th or 7th tier myself before I could even walk in the door. Fine, it's a fixed coordinate. It'll keep. I filed it. I couldn't do it yet, for one very practical reason. I was 17, I lived in a slum, and I was carrying a Tier 1 Lord core in the palm of my hand. A common man is innocent, but possessing a treasure is a crime. Show that core to the wrong person in the outer city, and I'd be dead before I finished explaining where I got it. So I burned one of my 2 exemptions on this settlement instead, kept the other, and moved on. Then the rewards arrived, and the first one was the one every ordinary person in this world dreams about. A crescent-shaped pattern formed on my right palm and stayed there, permanent, the simulated imprint, the mark of a simulator, the thing that tells the world you're no longer livestock. It's also a small storage space, which is where everything I just earned went. I sat down on the floor of my apartment and looked at my own hand for a while. 8 years of running. 3 years of eating in a school canteen with a boy whose hands shook. A photograph in a drawer of an orphanage that burned. And there it was, on my palm, in the shape of a moon. Then the true blood baptism came down. A ball of golden light descended and cracked open, and what was inside it was king-level true blood, a 7th order sealed kings, and a single drop of that holds an amount of energy I still don't have a unit for. Half an hour of it going through my bones. I'm told people scream. I didn't, but only because I was busy, and when it finished, dense patterns had formed across my body, spirit runes, the mark of the main world's own unique system, true spirit. Every world in all heavens has its own path. Wizards, immortals, gods, martial arts, machines, fighters, magic, and ours is genuinely, embarrassingly unremarkable next to any of them. No flashy ceiling, no signature miracle. If you ranked the systems by raw power, true spirit finishes near the bottom. It has exactly one property, and it's the reason we're not extinct. It converts perfectly into every other system's energy, and it can cultivate every other system's techniques, wizardry, immortal arts, divinity, machinery. Feed any of it into a true spirit body and it runs, like the ocean taking in every river that reaches it. That's why the main world has survived darkness, weirdness, and invasion by races whose names I hadn't earned the right to hear yet. First tier is the Awakening Realm, and it works like this. Every rune you condense strengthens flesh and bone. A Tier 1 simulator who condenses 10 runes is called a genius and gets recruited. I counted mine, lost count, and started again. At least 100. At 100 runes, in the Awakening Realm, before a single day of actual cultivation, my body alone would survive a nuclear detonation. Not harmony with nature. I didn't need that trick anymore, just flesh. Then the Divine Rank Redemption card opened, and I lost several days. 107,320 Divine Rank cultivation techniques have been selected for you. The Great Sun Tathagata Sutra, highest of the Buddhist methods, condenses the Karma Golden Wheel. Immortal Realm, 500 years as spring, 500 years as autumn. Eternal youth, in the literal sense. The Celestial Demon Codex, pluck stars out of the sky with one hand, condense the true form of a celestial demon. Time runs differently inside the simulated space, which is the only reason I got through any of it. I read day and night for what felt like a month, and then I found the one nobody picks, the All Heavens Divine Prison Sutra, supreme among all heavens, unique in all realms. At major achievement, a single one of your cells becomes a world. You can open the soul transformation prison and imprison demons and gods of every realm inside yourself, and then use them as cultivation nourishment. It is also unique in the strict sense. There is one copy. If I take it, no other simulator in the history of the system can ever have it. Which raised the obvious question of why a technique like that was sitting in the Divine Rank tier instead of somewhere far above it. The answer was in the notes, and it was honest. Its quality rating had been downgraded. Not because it got weaker, because it demands resources beyond what a royal family with centuries of accumulated legacy can supply, and because every prodigy who ever chose it came to a bad end. After enough of those, people stopped selecting it, so the system marked it down, the way a shop marks down a thing nobody will buy. I want to redeem the All Heavens Divine Prison Sutra. The will of the heavens went silent for a full half hour. I want you to appreciate that. I'd already shaken this entity down for a bonus reward like a man haggling over a used car, and it had processed that in a few seconds. This took 30 minutes. Are you certain? This is a god-slaying technique. Once you cultivate it, you become an enemy of all races, and countless demons will regard you as their mortal foe. You cannot bear this burden. Here's the thing. Everyone treats gods as inviolable, untouchable, a category error to even discuss. I'd spent 13 years watching what happens when everybody agrees something is impossible. It stops being a fact about the world and starts being a fact about the people. Gods are made of flesh and blood. Flesh and blood can be killed. And if it turns out I'm wrong, if the thing is genuinely past me, fine. Then I want a bite out of one on the way down. May countless karma be bestowed upon me. I think I actually moved it. It didn't argue again. A scripture came down out of nowhere and poured into my head, and without the will translating in real time, a single word of it would have burst my soul like a paper bag. It took decades of internal time. I came out of it with a headache that lasted 3 days and a piece of information I did not like. The first realm of the Divine Prison Sutra requires soul transformation. And soul transformation feeds on divine blood. Gods are 10th rank. Let me put that in the units I just learned. A single 7-order entity can defy the will of an entire world. That's the thing asleep in a sun, the thing my teacher told us to kill ourselves rather than meet. And next to a god, a 7th-order sealed king is an ant. One small mercy in the fine print. It needs divine blood. It does not specify that I have to be the one who takes it out of a god. Shelved. For now. The last thing in the imprint was the loot I'd carried home. D-rank Qingshuang sword, upgradable. D-grade bio armor, upgradable. B-rank martial skill, the martial limit Dao cannon, upgradable. My own life's work, filed as a B, SSS-rank key weapon, the Zhang clan royal jade pendant. And an SSS level artificial intelligence, an enhanced aura. I'd stolen Wong Kong's AI. I want that on the record too. Best trade of my life, and it kept paying out after the world ended. Given your courage in defying all races, the will of the heavens grants you a benefit. You may spend 100,000 points to transform this intelligence into an intelligent life form, forever loyal to you alone. Confirm. I didn't even pretend to think about it. Light came out of the imprint in 7 colors and folded itself into a young woman in a blue combat suit, standing in my apartment, waiting. You need a name, I said. From now on, you're called Mei Chen. It means without a heart, lacking normal human emotion. I thought it was funny at the time, and I've since decided it was a bit on the nose. Your subordinate Mei Chen greets your master. You don't need to be that formal in future. Yes. We materialized together, at that exact moment, back inside my hibernation pod, which is a sealed tube built for exactly one 17-year-old. The pod is not large. We were packed in there like 2 things in a tin. Her hair was against my face, and I could smell it, and neither of us could move a single limb independently, and the atmosphere in that pod went from businesslike to extremely ambiguous inside about 4 seconds. She turned bright red, an artificial intelligence, blushing, 6 minutes old, and hit the hatch release hard enough to dent it. Thousands of students surfaced at the same time, all across the examination halls, and the noise was tremendous. Why am I so unlucky? I only got a D-rank talent, born with cripples. There was a boy sitting on the floor rubbing his backside with the face of a man at a funeral. His talent had come out sea level, facing the man. He'd spent an entire lifetime in there, begging powerful figures for favors, and scraped out a D rating, and I am fairly confident he will carry that particular psychological shadow to his grave. Then there was the blonde one, who was having the best day of his life. Sea level, unbreakable golden spear. He was standing on a chair. Boys, listen. You just find a few rich women and you can reach the peak of life. He'd hooked a female tycoon inside the simulation and come out with a B rating, which in that room made him royalty. The failures were already swarming him. Brother, protect me. I'm willing to be your slave. And the class beauty, who had spent 3 years looking through him like he was a window, was suddenly finding reasons to be near his chair. He held up 3 fingers. 3,000 points. 30 million yuan. The room made a noise. I sat on the edge of my pod and listened to the rest of them compare runs, and slowly worked out something that had not occurred to me even once in 13 years. Everybody else's simulation had been easy. One classmate had been reincarnated as a Rottweiler named Shadow, and his main quest was making his owner internet famous. That's it. That was the whole assignment. He got a C. Another had drawn wealth and billions, with a main quest of becoming the nation's most eligible husband. Eat well, sleep well, have children with internet celebrities. C rating. I had been in hell for 17 years, fought a nation's special forces at 15, and taken several hundred nuclear warheads to the face at 17, and a boy 2 rows over had been a dog with a social media account. So I'm the only one on hell difficulty? Then I looked over at the next examination room, and the noise in my head stopped. It was quiet in there, completely quiet, and my friend's pod was still sealed. I need to explain the choice because it's the cruelest thing in this world and nobody talks about it out loud. A student who fails the simulation has 2 options. Come back to the main world and be a beast of burden for the rest of a short life. That's option 1, and it's the one the posters recommend. Or stay inside the simulated world, where you are a superior being with a system and a talent and decades of a life that actually belongs to you, and take the 5 obstacles when they come. Senses shutting down one at a time, cognition going crooked, madness, and then the end. He'd chosen it. My friend, whose father serves people for a living and whose mother washes dishes, whose hands shook so badly that morning he couldn't do up his own collar, he'd got in that pod, found out what he'd drawn, and decided that a few good decades somewhere else beat 60 years of this. Perhaps he will never come back. I went and stood next to his pod anyway. The seal was the standard kind, the sort of thing I could have opened with 2 fingers on any morning that week. I didn't touch it. It doesn't work like that. Once the choice is registered, there's nothing on this side of the glass to open. The pod isn't holding him. It's just where his body is going to sit until it stops. Somewhere in a world I'll never see the name of, a version of him is currently having a life, and in 40-odd years, his senses will start switching off one at a time, and he'll know exactly why. He'd asked me that morning in the corridor what I thought the odds were. I told him nobody knows their own odds until the pod closes, which was true and was also the most useless thing I have ever said to anyone. I stood there a while, then I went to register my results. The academic affairs office had 2 teachers in it drinking tea and gossiping, and they didn't stop when I came in because nobody in this school had ever had a reason to stop talking for me. District 1 produced an A grade this year, on hard difficulty. The Huang family's little princess? That's the one. An adult from inner city has already extended an olive branch. Some context on the geography, because it explains everything about this world. Zhangcheng is 1 city with 2 halves. Outer city is 7 districts, over 1 million people each. Inner city is inside the wall. Inner city is protected by the spirit rail array. It has food and resources. It has a simulator on patrol 24 hours a day, every day, so the darkness never gets in at all. Nobody there has ever frozen in the street or heard the whispering. It is, without exaggeration, the dream of every single person in the 7 districts, and almost none of them will ever see the inside of it. The Huang family have a 3rd-tier simulator, you know. If it weren't for that incident back then, they'd already be one of the great families of inner city. The teacher lowered his voice, but not enough. At their peak, they planned to build a new city outside the walls, failed at the last minute, Origin Chi severely damaged. Be careful what you say. I filed that away. It became extremely relevant about 72 hours later. The principal handled my registration himself, and he was kind about it, which was worse. He'd already worked out how this was going to go. Every high scorer that morning had come through the door vibrating. I'd walked in calm, and calm means nothing to report. So, he picked up his pen and didn't look up. What evaluation did you receive? S-class. I'd already had the will of the heavens hide part of my results. Not out of modesty. The tallest tree gets felled by the wind, and I was carrying a god-slaying scripture and a Lord Core in my palm. S was a number I could survive people knowing. The principal wrote something down. This assessment is quite good, and there's still a great deal of potential, so don't be discouraged. He stopped. Wait. He looked up. S rank? The office detonated. Understand the scale. The Huang family's princess had scraped an A with an entire clan's worth of resources poured into her run, and that A had been enough to make inner city reach out on the same day. The principal spat his tea back into the cup. What kind of lousy tea is this? Quickly, bring my treasured Lingwu tea. Principal, that tea costs 500,000 yuan per tael. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Hurry up. Then he sat me down and started planning my life, and he was so happy about it that I let him run for a while. With your talent, you're certain to get a place in inner city. Certain. I'll write the recommendation myself tonight. I plan to stay in outer city. He looked at me like I'd said something in another language. I want to be fair to him here. That man had saved every yuan he earned for 40 years for exactly one purpose, which was to buy his way inside that wall, and he had never got there and never would. And a 17-year-old with the golden ticket in his hand had just told him no thank you. He argued hard. Outer city gets worse every year and more dangerous every year, and everyone with the slightest ability is clawing to get in, and what exactly do you think you're doing? I didn't give him the real answer, which is this. Inner city's benefits have been carved up by the great powers for 100 years. A simulator with no background who walks in there has 2 futures. Attach yourself to a simulated family and let them run you like an appliance, or attach yourself to nobody and get nothing. And I was carrying a Tier 1 Lord Core, an SSS Jade Pendant, a stolen AI, and a god-slaying scripture. Joining a faction means living in close proximity to clever people every single day. I'd have lasted a year. Eventually he gave up, sighed, opened a drawer, and put a key on the desk. A villa in the 6th district. Downtown, safest area we have. It's small, but it's central. Tens of millions of yuan. That key. A small token from the school, he said, for our most outstanding graduate. He didn't mention the other half, which is that the Empire repossesses student housing the day you graduate, and that as of 9 o'clock that morning, I had nowhere to live. I took it. The 6th District No. 1 High School is my alma mater, and I intend to be useful to it. The queue outside had heard everything through the door. Did you see that? Even someone from the security department wouldn't get that reception. And then the phrase S-level rating went off in the corridor like a device. Here's what they were actually reacting to. I'm not from here. I came to Jiangcheng 8 years ago as a refugee out of Linhai City, hundreds of kilometers away, with nothing. I was the poor kid, the outsider, the one who lived in the free rooms. Quiet, few friends, and for the first 3 years, the local kids arranged things so that I stayed that way. And overnight, the slum boy became somebody they were going to have to look up to for the rest of their lives. You could watch it move through the corridor in waves: envy, awe, calculation, and under a few of the faces, something considerably less pleasant than any of those. In the morning, a peasant. By evening, the emperor's court. I walked home through it, and behind me, the entire 17-year-old population of the 6th district started rewriting its memories of me. Then the sun went down, and I want to describe what that means here, because it is the actual shape of this world, and I've been putting it off. The temperature crashes, not falls, crashes. It was high summer, graduation season, short sleeves and sweat at noon, and by 9 in the evening, people were in thick down jackets and still shivering. And the darkness comes in like a tide. Not the absence of light, a substance. It rolls over the border towns in a wave you can watch approaching, thick as ink, and it eats light. Military-grade floodlights go out under it like matches in a bucket. And inside the dark, there's a sound, a faint sobbing, something between a ghost keening and a crowd whispering. And if you listen, and you always listen, there's no choice about it. There's something almost inviting underneath. Every ordinary person hears it in their own head, clearly, every night, year after year. It never stops and it never gets easier. Between the cold and the whispering, ordinary people freeze in the street or lose their minds and don't come back. In the outer city, living to 40 is considered a good run and a bit of a miracle. That's the world. That's the world I grew up in, that a boy in a sealed pod decided he'd rather not return to, and that half the school is now doing arithmetic about how to get out of. Master, are you going out? I'm going to get something. It's dangerous out there at night. Stay home. I touched my toe to the ground and came down on a rooftop a couple of 100 meters up. From there you can read the whole city in one glance, and it reads like a diagnostic. The city was drowned. Black from edge to edge, with a handful of lights scattered across it, and each light was a simulator burning their own life force to hold a circle open. A Tier 1 awakening realm. Simulator lights up a few dozen meters, one firefly, one apartment block. Tier 2 transcendent lights up a few hundred meters, a torch, one street. Tier 3 morning star lights thousands of meters, a field of stars, several districts at once. Anything Tier 4 or above left Jiangcheng years ago for the rich cities, and I don't entirely blame them. Fighting the darkness burns spiritual power and chi and blood, and a decaying border town is low return and high risk. That's not villainy, that's a career decision, and everyone makes it. And in the middle distance, past the wall, inner city, a soft dome of light like an inverted bowl over 10 miles of ground. People strolling, snack stalls open, children running around with candied hawthorn on sticks at 10 o'clock at night. 7 million people in the outer city exist to send resources and talent through that wall, and every single one of them knows exactly what they are. Somebody in a chat group put it better than I could. In the eyes of inner city, the whole of outer city is just a large factory. 8 years ago, when I got here, Jiangcheng was prosperous, genuinely, 100 times better than what I was standing over. Then the simulators started leaving, and the leaving accelerated the decay, and the decay accelerated the leaving. At the rate I was looking at, within a year or two, the 7 million ordinary people of the outer city could simply be abandoned, not attacked, not conquered, just left, one night, with nobody holding a circle open. That's what happened to Linhai City. That's why I'm a refugee. I felt my fists close, and then I made myself stop, because I have been extremely clear with myself about this. Running from Linhai taught me precisely how cold human nature gets when the lights go out. I lost my savior complex somewhere on that road at 9 years old, and I was not about to put my neck out for 7 million strangers. That was the plan anyway. Then the darkness noticed me. It came at the rooftop from every direction at once, and I was about to burn a little key and blood to push it off. Standard procedure. Every simulator does it 100 times a night. When a much better idea occurred to me, I ran the All Heavens Divine Prison Sutra instead. Every spirit rune on my body lit up, all 100 odd of them at once. Light came off me and filled a 100-meter radius instantly. I did the maths later. About 10,000 square meters. Bigger than a football pitch. From a Tier 1 Awakening Realm simulator who was supposed to manage a few dozen meters on a good night. And then the sutra did something I hadn't asked it to do. It started to pull. Every scrap of darkness inside that radius turned into a current and flowed into me. The way water goes down a drain. The way light goes into the thing you don't want to look at. It didn't disperse. It didn't burn off. It got eaten. 30 seconds later, there was nothing left in that circle but clean cold air, and I burped. Genuinely, out loud, on a rooftop, like a man leaving a buffet. The #1 law in all the realms, and it turns out it can absorb dark energy, the stuff that mutates every living thing it touches, the stuff Wong Kong's entire civilization could not shield against, contain, or store. My scripture treats it as a light snack, but there was one detail I didn't like at all. The darkness screamed, and then it ran, not dispersed, ran, away from me, all of it, in the same direction, at speed, the way a shoal turns when something large arrives. Isn't that a bit too intelligent? I stood on that roof with a very unpleasant thought forming. Everyone in this world treats the dark as weather, a phenomenon, a hazard. Weather doesn't scream and it doesn't flee. 500 meters away, 2 men in security department uniform were having a cigarette under a street lamp, and I'd been listening to them for a while because it was the only conversation in the district worth hearing. The younger one had a crew cut and looked about 20 and talked like a man of 60. One year I've been assigned to this district and I have not had a single day off, not one. Here's the Empire's bargain spelled out. The Empire protects every ordinary person until they come of age. Food, housing, education, the 3 dishes, and a soup. In exchange, every simulator it produces owes it darkness duty. That's the deal. That's always been the deal, and it's not even a bad one. The part that isn't in the brochure is where you serve it. Newcomers with connections get transferred into inner city or one of the safe central districts inside a month. The unconnected stay out here and burn their own life force to keep a street lit. What's the rush? The older one didn't even look up. I haven't had a day off in years. Captain Chen, 6th District. He'd been holding that patch with a handful of subordinates through years of losing simulators faster than they arrived, and the fact that anyone in the 6th District was still alive at all was mostly down to him personally. When are our subsidies coming through? The young one said. Those people in inner city throw parties every night. They could at least leave us the scraps. He looked at his own hands. Burning your own spiritual power to light up other people. Isn't this just being a human-shaped light bulb? You should be glad you were assigned to the 6th District, Captain Chen said, and not Black Dragon's stronghold. That hellhole is no place for humans. Remember that too. It becomes my problem in about 48 hours. The young one asked the question I wanted the answer to. Captain, with your qualifications, why are you still here? You could have transferred out years ago. Captain Chen took a drag and gave him the acceptable answer. My son's about to graduate. I'm saving this spot for him. He didn't give the real one, but it wasn't hard to find. The veterans keep transferring out. The recruits keep not arriving. And if the team leader goes too, then there is nobody left at all. And 1.5 million ordinary people in the 6th District go to sleep tonight in a district with no light in it. He was going to stand there until it killed him, and he'd worked out a story about his son so that nobody would make it into a thing. I put that man on a list I hadn't consciously started keeping. Then, 500 meters from them, a rooftop lit up like a flashbang, and both of them were blinded to tears. After nightfall, only a simulator's life force can pierce the darkness. Captain Chen had his arm across his eyes. But this light, it's so dazzling. Could a morning star be passing through the district? By the time their vision came back, the roof was empty. I crossed the night like a hawk and came down at a low-rent housing block on the edge of the 6th District because I hadn't gone up on that roof for the view. I'd gone to get something, and it was in a building I was supposed to have finished with that morning. There are 2 kinds of room in that block. The first they call coffin rooms, and the name is descriptive rather than poetic. 2 square meters, a bed, and not enough floor left over to stretch your legs out beside it. Free to any orphan under 18. The same room costs an adult $5,000 a month. The second is a 10 square meter 1-bedroom. No air conditioning, no water heater, no washing machine, shared kitchen, shared toilet, about $10,000 a month, and you cannot rent one unless you have children. Single people aren't eligible. 2 children gets you a reduction, 3 or more and you pay nothing at all and receive a subsidy on top, which is why the poorest families in the Great Yan Empire are the most desperate to have children, and why nobody in that building would ever call it a trap out loud. One child who comes back from the pod a simulator changes the fate of an entire family line. Every kid in that stairwell was somebody's ticket, and every one of them knew it, and it did not make them love their parents less. That's the part outsiders never get right. 5,000 people live in that block. There is no simulator stationed there, so they sleep in layers, under thick blankets, curled up small, gritting their teeth through the whispering until the sky grays out. The only warm minutes anyone gets are when a patrol passes and the light spills in. They told me later that it felt warmer than usual that night. I let myself in with my key, up to the 5th floor, innermost room on the left. The door squeaked the way it always had, and the entire floor woke up. Nobody in an apocalypse sleeps deeply. I could hear them, one room at a time, going quiet, and then reaching under the beds for kitchen knives, and then relaxing when they got a look at me through the gaps in their doors. Then the quicker ones did the arithmetic. He's out after dark, and the dark isn't touching him. He passed. He's a simulator. Candles started coming on down the corridor. Outer City has no working infrastructure at night, and ordinary electric light doesn't survive out there anyway, so people burn special candles that cost more than they should. A middle-aged man opened his door and started urgently gesturing at his daughter to come out into the hall. Same man who had locked that girl in their apartment for 3 days, 3 years ago, because she'd been seen talking to me on the stairs. Xiaolei, you're back so late. That was Aunt Wang from the room opposite, already in the doorway, already smiling. Are you hungry? Shall Aunt Wang cook you a midnight snack? A beat. And please don't take it to heart if Aunt Wang did anything wrong in the past. Last spring festival, she caught me standing near her kitchen door because there was meat cooking in there, and I hadn't smelled meat in a while, and she scolded me about it, on and off, for a month. I know exactly what the version of me from before that pod would have done here. He'd have stood in that corridor and enjoyed himself for a solid 10 minutes. The returning Dragon King, the face slap, the whole routine. He'd earned it. I'd just lived a full life in another world and buried people in it. I couldn't find the appetite anywhere. They're not villains. They're bullies, which is a smaller thing. People who are cruel to the weak because they're frightened of the strong, and who genuinely cannot understand why anyone would still be angry now that they've stopped. There's nothing to win there. The correct move is to say goodnight and close the door. So I said goodnight and closed the door. My room had a bed in it and nothing else. There was never anything else. I pulled the iron box out from under it. 2,000 odd in banknotes, in small denominations, which had been my entire net worth for 8 years and was now a rounding error. Some documents, a refugee registration card, and a yellowed photograph. 30 odd children lined up in front of an old building, squinting into the sun. 5 characters on the plaque above the door. Shuguang Welfare Home, Dawn. The instant my fingers touched it, the photograph burst into flame. Black smoke came boiling off it, and the paper went hot enough that I dropped it. And understand, my body had just eaten several hundred nuclear warheads, and I dropped it like it was a branding iron, on reflex, because it hurt. It burned on the floor of a 2-square-meter room with a wooden bed and a cotton blanket in it and did not damage a single thing. Not the floor, not the blanket, not the box. Seconds later, it was over, and everything was exactly as it had been. The photograph was intact, not even singed, except that now, in the picture, only my face was left. Every other child's face had dissolved. 30-odd small bodies still standing in a line in front of that building in their good clothes, and above every collar, nothing at all. A row of faceless people. The cold went up my spine from the bottom to the top of my skull, and I want to be honest that I stood in that room for a while without a single useful thought in my head. Here's what I know, and it isn't much. I transmigrated into this world 8 years ago, and for reasons nobody has ever explained to me, I have almost no memory of anything before I was 10 years old. It's not blurred, it's absent, in the way a deleted file is absent. One fragment survived, the day Shuguang Welfare Home burned, people scattering in every direction, smoke going up in a column behind us, and the old dean, a kind man, and I couldn't tell you his face now if you paid me, crouching down in the middle of all that and pushing this photograph into my hands. This photo is important. No matter what happens, you must keep it with you. He said it the way you'd hand somebody the weight of the world. I was too young to understand the tone, and I've never forgotten it. I have carried that photograph through 8 years, 2 cities, 1 refugee corridor, and 4 moves. It is the reason I went back to a coffin room on the same night I finished the greatest simulation run in that school's history, instead of sleeping in a villa. And now, on the day I became a simulator, it had waited until my hand touched it and then erased everyone in it but me. Which raised a question I'd been carefully not asking for a while. Was any of this a coincidence? The talent pool malfunctioned in my exam. Out of 3 billion people, it malfunctioned in mine, and handed me a divine rank talent that no gacha pool on the list contains. The will of the heavens keeps paying attention to me. It answered a rookie's questions. It finished my map unprompted. It sat silent for half an hour, rather than refuse me a scripture. The Great Yan Empire has 3 billion people. SSS ratings are rare, but they are not unique. Somebody gets one every year. So why me? Why that talent? In that pool? In that room? Fine. New objective. Find out what Shuguang Welfare Home actually was, and pull that thread until something comes off it. I opened the simulator forum. Every simulator in the Empire has access to it. A virtual platform with tens of millions of people on it, where they chat, brag, trade information, and buy and sell absolutely anything, provided you have the points. It is, functionally, the only place in this world where the truth is available at a fixed price. First, it wanted a permanent nickname. Permanent as in permanent. You pick it once, and there is a polite note advising you not to use your real name. Carrying a knife on a rainy night, already taken. Feng Chen, taken. Lone Blade Reaper, taken. Going to a brothel alone, also taken, which tells you a great deal about the user base. I gave up and used the handle from my old life, from a world where the worst thing that happened to me was work, listening to the rain at night. Available. Note: this forum contains a great many shady characters. Do not reveal your identity to strangers. The trending list was an education all by itself. 3-star mid-level martial world. Hard difficulty, led by a 4th-tier simulator. 5 players needed. Urgently buying 1 simulation slot. Bidding starts at 100,000 points. 200 million points offered to acquire 10,000 acres of spirit fields. That last one had set the whole forum on fire. Which powerful being is that extravagant? Look at the color of his nickname before you say anything else. It was gold. Gold means certified by the will of the heavens, and that means a 7th order sealed king. Tier 7 simulators get titled personally. They carve out fiefdoms measured in millions of square kilometers. The standing description of them is that they obey orders and defy commands, and even the royal family only barely manages them. One of those had wandered onto the forum to do some shopping, casually, with a budget 400 times my entire life savings. I closed the tab and searched for what I'd come for. Linhai City, Shuguang Welfare Home. The forum can reach into the real-world network. Anything that has ever existed online is findable through it, and I mean anything, down to an ordinary person scanning a code to buy a bottle of water 11 years ago on a Tuesday. The result came back completely blank. I ran it again. Blank. Different phrasing. Blank. City records, news archives, municipal registration, charity filings, a single photograph, a single mention in a single comment thread anywhere on Earth. Nothing. That building stood for more than 10 years. It had 30-odd children in it. It had a plaque with 5 characters on it, and somebody paid for that plaque. A blank slate is not possible. Somebody erased it. On purpose. All of it. So I did the direct thing, because I have never once been patient. I posted a bounty, 1,000 points for any information regarding the Shuguang Welfare Home in Linhai City. 1,000 points is 10 million yuan. There are people on that forum who would sell their own family history for 1/10 of it. The post was auto-deleted in under 3 seconds. I sat on a bed in a 2-square-meter room and looked at the empty space where my post had been. 3 seconds. Not a moderator. Not a report. Nothing human is in that loop at all. To reach into a platform run by the will of the heavens and take something down inside 3 seconds, the other party has to have access at the level of the will's own authority. Whoever burned that orphanage is standing next to the thing that runs the system. It seems this matter is very complicated, I thought, and I am not even qualified to be involved in it. So I put the photograph back in the iron box and I searched something I was qualified for instead. Tang Long. No blocking on that one at all. A flood of results. Symbol King Tang Long. 300 years ago, the most dazzling genius in the entire history of the Zhong family. SS-level talent on his very first simulation. Somewhere in an advanced world he obtained the legacy of the ancient cultivator, and after that he came up like something falling the wrong way. The youngest king-level expert the Great Yan Empire had produced in 500 years, which is exactly the point at which the other royal bloodline families stopped applauding. Then, on one simulation, he tried to force a return to the main world. He was betrayed by King Wu. He lost his way somewhere between worlds, and he has been missing ever since. A century ago, a simulator reported seeing a madman in some reincarnated world who looked exactly like him. Incredibly powerful, completely insane, filthy, wandering, key deviated, talking to people who weren't there. The higher order simulators say Tang Long has been walking all heavens for centuries looking for something. I knew what he was looking for. It was in an ice coffin on a moon, in a world I'd left 3 days ago, and it had asked me if I came from the same place as her father. So much for my plan of trading the pendant for the Zhong family's friendship. Without Tang Long, that family is a wounded animal surrounded by rivals who have waited 300 years. If I walked up to their door holding an SSS-rank Jiang royal artifact and no explanation for where I got it, I wouldn't reach the second sentence. I put the pendant away, and I went to bed in a coffin room for the last time, in a building where 5,000 people were sleeping through the whispering with knives under their beds. In the morning, my grade went on file and Jiangcheng came apart. My details were on every major power's desk by lunch. Inner city families sent investigators. The Simulator Association wanted me recruited at all costs. The security department put in a request to make me a law enforcement officer of the 6th district, which I noted was the only offer anybody made that involved doing an actual job. An S-rank rating means at least A-level talent, realistically, S. Over in Zone 1 of the outer city, the Huang family patriarch, old, black-robed, and by all accounts not a man who says much, was standing at a window being quietly sick about it. If we could get that boy, we'd restore our family's glory in under 100 years. His granddaughter tried to console him, which I'm told did not help. Grandpa, I have A-level talent too. I was just unlucky at the end. Huang Ling, ponytail, District 1's school beauty, referred to across the whole zone as the goddess of Zone 1, and she meant it kindly. Her grandfather explained the wall to her, and it's worth repeating because it's the only place anybody in this story lays out the actual rules. Simulation difficulty runs easy, normal, hard, nightmare, hell, and one more above that which nobody has ever passed. Only nightmare or higher can produce an S rating. Below that, the ceiling is fixed no matter how well you do. And an S needs two things at once. You must change every key moment of your life, and you must complete over 50% of the main storyline. Your run was hard, he said. With this family's resources behind you, and rare items we don't have anymore, you finished under 70%. Nightmare is 10 times what you faced. She went quiet. Then, after a while, how did a poor kid with no connections do it? Fair question. I asked it myself, in a room with a burning photograph in it, about 9 hours earlier. The scale, for context, A-level talents show up about a dozen a year across the empire. Jiangcheng has 9 million people in it and can go a full year without producing a single S-level talent. Then Inner City raised the bidding, and they raised it in a way I hadn't expected. The Zhang family's third young master announced publicly that if I joined them, I would be granted the surname Zhang and entered on the register as a direct descendant. In a world where the great families hold 90% of everything, that is a graduate being handed a 9-figure salary, a seat at the boss's right hand, and the boss's family name on day one before doing any work. People in this empire have become somebody's godfather for a fraction of that. I declined, politely. Direct descendant is the polite phrasing. The blunt phrasing is household slave with excellent catering, and leaving aside that I like my freedom, I was carrying enough secrets that living inside a great family's compound, surrounded every day by observant people whose entire profession is noticing things, was a countdown, not a career. The third young master didn't take offense, which impressed me. He left the door open and said so. Everybody else in Jiangcheng concluded I had just set fire to the only chance I would ever get. And their reasoning is sound, honestly. 3 billion people, a few hundred S-level talents a year, and almost all of them fade out or die early. The mediocrities the families raise in comfort at least get to be rich for 60 years. 2 days later, my appointment letter arrived. Every new simulator is assigned a district to guard, with 3 days to take office. Mine said, Black Dragon Stronghold. I sat and looked at it for a while. Black Dragon Stronghold is 10-odd kilometers outside Jiangcheng, in the open. It is a no-man's land full of the people who couldn't survive anywhere else. Smugglers, contract killers, arms dealers, organ traffickers, and the kind of refugee who has stopped being able to tell which of those he is. There's a line about the place that gets repeated so often, it's practically a municipal slogan. What's most terrifying out there isn't the darkness, it's the human heart. Simulators get sent to Black Dragon Stronghold for serious disciplinary offenses. It is not a posting. It is a sentence. And by long-standing custom, a new S-rank rating chooses his own district. That's not a courtesy, it's policy. You don't take the rarest asset in a city of 9 million and roll dice with it. So somebody had gone into a filed imperial document and changed it. Was it the Zhang family's third young master? One of the 15 other powers I turned down? I genuinely didn't know, and that was the part that bothered me. A moment's spite from someone with access, and an ordinary simulator's entire future is over. They'd have taken office and died inside a month, and there would be no investigation because there was no crime that anybody would ever be able to point at. They shouldn't have dared touch me, but somebody had and had done it inside 48 hours, and I filed that next to the 3-second deletion. Then Mei Chen knocked. Master, Miss Huang of the Huang family has come to visit. She had dressed for it. White shirt, black pleated skirt, boots. The full campus goddess presentation, calibrated with real precision to disassemble any 17-year-old boy who had never been in love. I had, at that point, technically been dead for 200 years and had once said goodbye to somebody on a mountain covered in peach blossoms. Sit down, what do you want? Huang Ling is quick, I'll give her that. She adjusted inside a second and went straight to it. You rejected the Zhang family's third young master. Someone currying favor with them altered your appointment letter. A pause. I've already dealt with that person for you. And the letter? Filed with the Empire. Nobody can change it now. Not my family, not the Zhangs. She leaned forward. Black Dragon Stronghold is a mixed bag of fish and dragons. If you take office there alone, you will die. Join the Huang family and I'll guarantee your safety and have you transferred back within the year. No need for further nonsense, I said. Before you, 15 other powers extended olive branches. If you can't offer me something that actually moves me, go home. She sat there. I found out later roughly what was going through her head because she is not good at hiding her face. She had come in with a 3-stage plan, appeal to emotion, then to reason, then, if required, to the fact that she looks like that, and I had walked past all 3 without appearing to notice any of them were happening. He seems pretty clever. I didn't expect him to be such a blockhead. Then she played her real card, and it turned out to be the one thing in the city I actually wanted. Black Dragon Stronghold looks like chaos, she said. It isn't. It's entrenched. The interests of a dozen families run through that place, and if you go barging in, you won't be fighting outlaws. You'll be fighting everyone whose money is out there. She looked up. I know because the land is my family's. And there it was. By imperial law, expanding the empire's territory exempts a simulator from a mountain of tax. So 30 years ago, at the height of their power, the Huang family mobilized the entire clan and started building a new city outside Jiangcheng. They were obstructed from every direction: supply, permits, labor, the lot. And with the city nearly finished, the funding chain broke and they had to abandon it. An almost complete city standing empty in a no man's land, which filled up, over 30 years, with exactly the sort of people who fill up an empty city nobody is watching. That's Black Dragon's stronghold. And that failure is the incident the teachers wouldn't say out loud over their tea. It is the reason the Huang family's origin chi is damaged, why they're still in the outer city, and why an old man in a black robe was standing at a window being sick about a boy he'd never met. She was warning me off it. She had just told me exactly why I was going to go. Because here's the thing I'd been turning over since the settlement screen, and it had two impossible requirements attached. Building a city needs the land cleared first, and nobody knows how many dark creatures are standing out there in the open country between here and there. And it needs money on a scale that makes a great family flinch. Break the funding chain halfway, and all you've built is a very expensive ruin, as the Huang family can testify at length. But Black Dragon's stronghold is not empty ground. The Huang family already did the hard part. The foundations are in, the framework is up, the streets exist. Acquire the land, put down a Tier 1 Lord Core, and I don't have a construction project. I have a city, and it's not optional, which is the part I hadn't told anybody. I have one tax exemption left. One. After that, it's 50% of every reward I ever earn, forever, quietly deducted by the will of the heavens so that I don't get emotionally agitated about it. No simulator alive can accept that and go anywhere. So, the gangs out there run to second tier and probably third tier strongmen, because nothing weaker could have survived 30 years in that darkness. And the inner city families will absolutely not stand by and watch an unaffiliated 17-year-old put a city on land they've been quietly farming. Both of those problems have the same answer, and it's the only answer I've ever had. Be strong enough that the problem stops being a problem. Except that I can't be. Not yet. Because the first realm of the All Heavens Divine Prison Sutra requires soul transformation, and soul transformation runs on the true blood of a god. Without it, I sit at Tier 1 Awakening Realm forever, with 100 spirit runes and a scripture I can't turn the first page of. And at my current strength, obtaining divine blood in the main world is not difficult, it's comedy. There's one road. There's always one road, and it's always the same one. Go back in. Come back in 2 days, I told Huang Ling, and sent her home confused. 3 days until I take office at Black Dragon's stronghold. 3 days is a long time. I've done more with less. I gave Mei Chen the martial limit Dao cannon and told her to start on it and to stay in the house. Then I used my free simulation. White light, simulation privileges used. Would you like to start immediately? Activate. World. 2-star magic world. Difficulty. Hell. A world of high archmages with the power to end nations. A human empire more powerful than it has ever been, with elves and dwarves and orcs all bowing at its throne. And fell energy from the abyss, eating quietly through the will of the world itself. Main quest. The expedition to defeat the abyss demon. Then the life script, and I read it the way you read a letter from a doctor. You were born at age 0, an ordinary little skeleton in the boneyard wasteland. I read that sentence 4 times. Age 1. Dazed and confused, nearly eaten by your own kind. Age 2. You finally wake up and beat every skeleton nearby. You become a skeleton warrior. Age 3. A 5th-tier dark alchemist arrives to build an army. You are enslaved. Age 6. For a sacrificial ritual, he sends the army to take cities and collect corpses and blood. Age 8. You block a troll king's path and are nearly trampled to death. Age 10. The ritual completes. An abyss demon descends and devours the entire army. You are dead. Starting as a skeleton. All equipment through gameplay. At least last time I started in an orphanage. This time I don't even start alive. A skeleton's ceiling is a joke. No flesh, no meridians, no blood, no key. Everything, all of it, was riding on one thing again. Self-adaptive talent is active. Congratulations. You have obtained the divine rank talent. Undead Scourge. I am an army. I am the calamity. All creatures you kill are automatically converted into members of the Scourge army. The number is bound to the strength of your soul. The stronger your soul, the more you may enslave. Then 3 system notes came up, and every one of them changed the game. Your initial talent is overpowered. You may not purchase any temporary talent cards during this run. Multiple other simulators will be present in this world. Do not reveal your identity. You have lost newbie protection. If your rating falls below C and you die inside the simulation, your body and soul in the main world die with you. There it is. Last time, dying was a bad grade. This time, dying is dying. So I packed properly. The Zhang clan royal jade pendant went with me, and not for the stat line. If Tang Long has been walking all heavens for 3 centuries looking for something, then every world I enter is a place he might be, and I am carrying the only thing in existence he wants. I'd like to hand it over before somebody else works out I have it. Then I spent 100,000 points on upgrades. D-rank Qingshuang sword upgraded to S-rank, the frost sword, damages the soul directly, inflicts freezing. D-tier bio armor upgraded to S-tier, undead armor, immune to a portion of both physical and soul-based attacks, self-repairing. Wang Kong gave me both of those in a corridor full of jars in exchange for my genes in a world that no longer needs them. 17 years ago, I sat in a classroom and read a life script that told me I would be an average man in a martial arts hall that closes, with parents who die badly, and I would never do anything about any of it. I came out of it a god of war in a world that still tells its children, I'm coming back. The mark on my palm says simulator. The photograph in the iron box says somebody with the authority of heaven itself went to the trouble of erasing 30 children and left my face in the frame on purpose. I don't know what that means yet. I know that whatever burned that orphanage has already noticed me and can reach into the will of the heaven's own platform and delete me from it in under 3 seconds. So I'm gonna go and get strong enough to make it introduce itself. I stepped into the light. And somewhere in a wasteland of bones under a sky the color of a bruise, in a body with no heart in it, something very small sat up and opened its eyes.